New disturbing details on the deaths of soldiers at Fort Hood military base in Texas. 28 soldiers from Fort Hood died this year. Now, this report exposes an environment that allows sexual harassment, assault, and other crimes to occur.
Army Specialist Miguel Yazzie and Private Carlton Chief from New Mexico, both Navajo, both dead at Fort Hood.
We are saddened by the loss of our warriors.
Sergeant Elder Fernandez, who was missing for a week, was found dead miles from the Fort Hood base where he was stationed.
And Lisa, they are very frustrated with the lack of information coming out of the military and coming out of Fort Hood.
He left his own country to come and serve America. Whoever did this will pay for it.
The soldier's family wants answers. The 23-year-old Army sergeant is the latest in a string of mysterious deaths involving soldiers based in Fort Hood, Texas.
I just hope this will be the last one, because nobody should just go disappear on Earth like in thin air, and all of a sudden you find him somewhere.
Look what happens when you report sexual harassment at Fort Hood. You get bullied, you get hazed, you get harassed, you turn up dead. It's very suspicious. Someone's gonna with all that stuff. No, it's questionable. Let's put it that way, and I don't put anything past anyone anymore. He's an example that if you speak up, if you report it, look what happens to you.
The Army tonight telling the grieving family of Vanessa Guillen that remains found last week are indeed her. This as marchers throughout Texas are demanding a congressional investigation into the disappearance and murder of the Army soldier.
A Fort Hood soldier from Indianapolis that's been missing for a couple of weeks now has been found dead on the base in Texas. 19-year-old Private Dakota Stump was last seen last month driving a black Ford Mustang. His mom says she had just talked to him on the phone the day before he disappeared. She thought everything was okay.
Congress is launching an investigation into recent deaths at Fort Hood.
Tonight, growing calls for answers in the death of Fort Hood soldier Private Ana Fernanda Basaldua Ruiz and allegations that she was sexually harassed on base before she died. The Army's Criminal Investigation Division reporting no foul play is suspected in her death, but an official cause hasn't been released.
The Army confirms there is no foul play.
Private Morales, who was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, vanished.
Within a month's time, 3 dead soldiers have been discovered in Bell County. All of them were stationed here at Fort Hood.
There has been a mass shooting at an Army base in Texas, Fort Hood.
A man and 2 children were found dead this morning at a home on post.
We are not being allowed on post at this hour. Investigators are also keeping details about the specifics of what happened here today very close.
Hassan is accused of murdering 13 people at Fort Hood and injuring dozens of others.
We've had a terrible tragedy here at Fort Hood today.
While all 9 soldiers who were killed in a training accident at Fort Hood, Texas have been identified.
Leadership has failed our soldiers at Fort Hood.
Well, for more than 200 years, the U.S. military has sent young men and women into harm's way to protect the American way of life. No one ever suspected the biggest dangers they might face would be here on the bases that they live in on American soil. We're live on Fort Hood tonight. 25 News. Back to you.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
So right now we're standing on the border of Fort Cavazos. Really, the main entrance gate is a little bit further down this road. This property was once known, though, by a different moniker, Fort Hood. And this base has been haunted for decades by mysterious deaths, murders, mass shootings, violence, and so much more. In today's video, we're going to be diving incredibly deep into these stories, investigating the locations where these bodies were discovered, and attempting to discover what may be causing the curse of Fort Hood. So on today's video, obviously, we're not going to be getting any access to the fort itself or any of the military base. It's highly restricted. But a number of these people who've been found dead, these mysterious deaths, these self-unalivings, my hair is crazy. It's so windy out today. All the cases that we're investigating today took place outside of the bounds of Fort Hood itself. It's very interesting, actually, when you take a look at the sign, Fort Cavazos, the great place, when in reality, this place isn't so great after all.
Fort Hood, one of the most notorious locations in all of America. A military fort plagued with an extremely dark and mysterious history. Soldiers keep dying at Fort Hood under extremely bizarre and suspicious circumstances. And yet, to this day, There have never been any official explanations given as to why these soldiers died, why there were circumstances surrounding their deaths that don't make sense, and exactly why they may have died in the first place. You see, Fort Hood itself is covered with a dark cloud of conspiracy. Are these soldiers dying because they learned about secret programs that they should never have learned about? Were they a part of these programs and then killed when they were no longer useful? Why has there been silence from the authorities and the higher-ups at Fort Hood regarding this string of extremely disturbing deaths? In today's episode, I interviewed a woman whose own family member died under incredibly suspicious circumstances at Fort Hood, who was sharing her story publicly for the first time. In fact, her cousin posted on his social media something that they had seen happening and experienced at the fort. They then disappeared from Fort Hood, and after posting all of this just shortly afterwards, they disappeared from Fort Hood, ended up in a local jail with no explanation, and died in their jail cell that very evening. And this is just the very beginning of the extremely disturbing story that I'm about to share with you. And by the end of today's video, I am 100% convinced that you will also believe that there's something deeply wrong at Fort Hood, and just like me, you'll question why nobody's talking about it and why the Army itself has remained silent. Today, we're diving into the curse of Fort Hood. Welcome to the Paranormal Files. Imagine walking into a room and the air carries a scent so distinct it feels like a whisper from the past. In our investigations, we've encountered places where the atmosphere tells a story, not just through sights and sounds, but through scents that linger and evoke memories. This actually happened on the 2 previous episodes we posted on the channel. In the last episode, we were smelling diapers in the old nursing home, and the episode before that, we were smelling perfume in a room that the owner of the location said is haunted by a woman. This month, I've been exploring fragrances that resonate with the mysterious vibes that I often encounter. One of the scents that I received that really stood out was Cherry Punk by Room 1015, which had notes of saffron, violet, and cherry, and also the scent Kinetic by Toomey, which had notes of Italian mandarin, vanilla, and sandalwood. I love those light kind of floral scents. I have some colognes that are my mainstays, but Scentbird is a great way to try out all these different colognes and figure out which scent matches you. If you're intrigued by the idea of matching your scent to the mysterious ambiance that we delve into, there's an opportunity for you to explore a variety of fragrances tailored to your preferences with Scentbird. Scentbird offers a monthly subscription that lets you explore over 900 authentic designer and niche fragrances. Each month, you receive an 8 milliliter vial, providing about 120 sprays. Plenty to test how a scent works for you in various situations. Basically, Scentbird will send you these scents in a sampler form. They send you enough so that you can wear them out, you can try them around your friends and family and figure out which scent is for you. And then after testing out these fragrances, you can purchase a larger bottle if you'd like. But honestly, it's a great way to figure out which scent matches you. By using the promo code Paranormal55 or scanning the QR code on screen, you can also receive 55% off your first month. You get to try the first fragrance from Scentbird for only $8, and your next month will only be $16.95. Once again, that's promo code Paranormal55 for 55% off your first month at Scentbird. Once again, that's promo code Paranormal55 for 55% off your first month at Scentbird. Embark on your own olfactory journey into the unknown. Anyways, y'all, let's get back to today's show. Thanks to Scentbird for sponsoring this. And yeah, get ready. This is gonna get dark. Before we get into all the stories of death and despair, we have to talk a little bit about the history of Fort Hood itself. Fort Hood, which has now been renamed Fort Cavazos, is one of 750 military installations around the world. But this one happens to be one of the largest in the United States, covering 218,000 acres. Not only is it a huge installation, but in 2023, Fort Hood had 59,695 employees and 38,642 active duty military personnel. And like with any population, of course, more people means more crime, more death. But in the early days, before Fort Hood earned its reputation, many soldiers were excited to be stationed there. Their arrival marked the start of a new chapter in their lives. For many, Fort Hood would be the place where they prepared for war. It's the place where they called home before deployment. But over the years, things changed. With most new recruits, they arrived with an eagerness to train, learn, and master their skills. But for many at Fort Hood, soon after their arrival, That spark in their eye began to dim. The optimism drains from their bodies. And I will say, you'll find stories of people who've had great experiences while stationed at Fort Hood. But you'll also find many more people who claim that Fort Hood has an energy of darkness to it, a curse over the entire property. Some people have even claimed that they won't drink the water from Fort Hood. They won't go out alone after dark in the nearby community. And many people in the area always carry a gun. A few years ago, a woman was murdered at Fort Hood named Vanessa Guillen. We're going to talk about her death later on in this episode, but her own mother, Gloria, said about Killeen, Texas, the town that surrounds Fort Hood, quote, "It smells like death here. This town is death," end quote. And based on the stories that I'm about to tell you, I can definitely see why. Fort Hood was established in 1942 in Texas near Killeen in order to test tank destroyers during World War II. And over the years, it's grown into a critical hub for the United States Army, housing major units like the 1st Cavalry Division and supporting approximately 45,000 soldiers and their families. Known to locals as the Great Place, Fort Hood offers modern amenities from nice housing to proper medical facilities, and the entire place is designed to foster a strong community. They want the people in the Army to interact with locals in Killeen, and Fort Hood was essentially built as this mega fort where they can do all sorts of different things, train all sorts of different people, and they wanted to give Army soldiers a proper home, a place that they could plant their roots. Yet beneath this shining facade is a troubling pattern of death. Now, a lot of this research came from a woman named Jennifer Norris. In 1996, Jennifer was a new recruit in the United States Air Force when she was drugged and raped by her recruiter. So she knows exactly what it's like to not feel safe on a military base. But in 2016, Jennifer caught wind about all of the deaths and tragedies taking place at Fort Hood, and she decided to start looking into it. However, she quickly learned that Fort Hood's crime data wasn't publicly available. So from there, she went to work creating her own database called Military Justice for All, where she documented anything and everything that the authorities at Fort Hood didn't want the public to know. Disturbingly, her research showed that mysterious deaths, homicides, and alleged accidental deaths go back as far as 1988. But first, we have to tell you the story about the accidental death of 21-year-old Army Corporal Christopher Martin Ferguson. Christopher was born on April 12, 1985 in Ohio. In May of 2004, Chris decided to join the military and he was stationed at Fort Hood. Over the course of the next few years, he served his country well, and by 2007, he was just a few months away from being discharged, but that would never happen. On March 18, 2007, Chris had gone off base with a few of his friends. And before the night would end, Chris was in the hospital fighting for his life. His family would later get a call that he had from a third-story building. His family quickly flew to Texas to be with him, but when they arrived, they learned that Chris had a severe brain injury and that he likely wasn't going to make it. But strangely enough, that was the only injury that Christopher had. He had fallen 3 stories, but no other bone in his body was broken or even fractured, which didn't make a lot of sense to his family. His sister, Christina, would later say, quote, "Alcohol involved or not, you don't fall from a balcony to your head and not fracture one other bone, not have anything broken, only have your brain bleeding. My mom, myself, and my sister were flown out to see him and he was never awake. He was on life support for 7 days," end quote. Now, during that time, his sister tried talking to Chris's friends to figure out what had happened, but they all told her that they weren't allowed to talk about anything that happened that night. She was able to talk to some soldiers, but they denied ever being with Chris on the night of the accident. However, eventually, his family was given a baggie of items that were with Chris that evening. It included a blazer, some clothing he was wearing, and a camera he had that night. As Chris laid in the ICU, his sisters looked through the camera, and there they saw pictures of Chris on the night of the accident with the same very soldiers who said that they weren't with Chris that evening. So why would they lie? Sadly, on March 25, 2007, Chris would succumb to his injuries, and his family was still left without answers. That is, until they received a phone call. The call was from a girl who claimed that she had been with Chris on the night that he died, and she told his family that he had been in an altercation on the night of his accident. Apparently, Chris had seen something that evening that really upset him. He started arguing with a few of the guys there, and soon enough, these men started getting physical with him. One even punched him, and another guy put him in a headlock. Soon enough, these men brought Chris out on the balcony of this apartment, and while he was out there, the girl said that she heard Chris let out this horrific scream. Seconds later, the men ran back inside without Chris, and they made the girl hide in a closet while they called the police. Now, as you can imagine, when Chris's family heard this story, they were quick to tell the Killeen Police Department. But the police weren't at all interested in this story. In fact, they told Christina, Chris's sister, that the girl that had called her was lying just to start some drama. And in the years to come, they still weren't getting the answers that they deserved. The police didn't want to talk to this woman, they didn't want to hear this alternate history of events, so they pushed Chris's death aside. CID investigators promised Christopher's family that there would be an investigation. However, Christina, his sister, said that that never happened. For years, the Killeen Police Department, CID investigators, Fort Hood officials, and military police refused to answer any questions pertaining to her brother's death. Eventually, she filed a Freedom of Information request for the military to release any files related to Christopher's death, and in 2010, she finally received her first document. In the document, it was claimed that Chris had been drinking a lot that night, and as he was going to leave, he fell headfirst off the balcony. But interestingly, the document, which had all the witness accounts on it, was completely redacted. Like, the entire page was blacked out. So what didn't they want her to see? Eventually, Christina would speak to one of the sergeants with the Killeen Police Department, and he told her that there may have been an altercation that night, but that nothing they found indicated that someone had hurt Chris. So they had ruled his death a tragic accident. But years later, CBS reported on a prevention call center for veterans. And shockingly, Christopher's photograph was listed as one of the Army members who had died by self-unaliving. So, which was it? Was it an accident? Did Chris unalive himself? Or was Chris killed? Sadly, Christina and her family never got those answers. For this documentary, we actually visited the location where Chris fell to his death in order to illustrate how ridiculous it is that they claimed that he fell from such a high height and that he only sustained a single injury on his head. Take a look.
107 File Radar, contact 7 3/4 miles.
So right now we're standing in the apartment complexes that Christopher Ferguson, another soldier stationed here at Fort Hood, died at. And what's interesting is Christopher is another one of those deaths where you can look at the facts of the case, you can really analyze everything, and you know that it was a murder, and yet they claim that it was an accident. Now, remember, in Christopher's story, what essentially ended up happening is he was found on the ground. I don't know which unit he was in around here, but Christopher was found lying on the ground. He had a head injury, and he later on passed away from his injuries. What's interesting though is that, like I mentioned before, Christopher had no other injuries. None of his bones were broken. None of his bones were even fractured. Now, Connor, let's take a look over here. Now, imagine, this is the actual apartment complex. Imagine falling from one of these, even if it's this window all the way up here or this balcony, all the way down to the cement, and not sustaining any other breakage in any of your bones other than on your head. And in addition, there was all the other evidence, the people who witnessed an argument between Chris and some other individuals that evening, some friends of his, people that called in to report evidence and eyewitness testimony, all of which was completely ignored. Now, I will say to their credit, they did reopen the investigation in 2021, but nothing came of it. It took them 14 years from 2007 to 2021 to even state that yes, the circumstances of Christopher's death were suspicious, and yet nothing happened. Nothing changed. Nobody was convicted. Nobody was investigated. This is just another death, another victim to the curse of Fort Hood. I mean, take a look at that. Imagine just from that or falling down, onto the ground from that. You would definitely break something or fracture something. It would not just be a suspicious head injury. All right.
So as you can see right there, clearly, if Chris had really fallen from that high, he would have had more than a single injury to his head. I mean, it's just impossible to think that someone would fall off of a balcony like that and not sustain a single other injury, not on their arm, their leg, their ribs, their fingers, any other part of their body other than their head. And obviously, blunt force trauma to the head is a common way that people murder other people. So the whole thing just reeks. And just a few months after Chris died, another soldier associated with Fort Hood would perish, this time on the military base. It was June of 2007. Army Sergeant Lawrence Sprader was by himself at Fort Hood doing a routine training exercise. Now, if you've ever been to Texas in the summertime, let me tell you from experience, the heat here is brutal. And on that day, Sergeant Lawrence Sprader was conducting this exercise by himself. For hours, he was out in the wilderness, all alone, suffering in the Texas heat. Eventually, he knew that he wasn't going to make it through, and he even called his superiors multiple times to tell them that he needed help, but no one listened and no one came for him. Sadly, during his training exercise, Lawrence collapsed near some thick brush, and eventually he succumbed to the elements. Now, one would think that after he never came back, Lawrence's superiors would go looking for him, but that wasn't the case. In fact, Lawrence's body sat decomposing in the Texas heat in the wilderness for 4 entire days until someone finally found him, completely on accident. An autopsy confirmed that he had died from dehydration and hyperthermia. Now, his superiors tried to claim that Lawrence wanted to be out there all by himself to finish the drill, but during an investigation into his death, it was revealed that Lawrence's superiors had actually sent him out on a solo mission as a punishment. They also found that Lawrence had tried to call them for help multiple times that day, but that they had ignored his calls. Now, luckily, months after his death, several soldiers were suspended from Fort Hood because of this. The investigation revealed that not only did these soldiers not look for Lawrence after he failed to come back, but that they also refused to let soldiers have water breaks, and they weren't supervising well enough in these extreme conditions. Witnesses stated, quote, "Leaders thought it was a joke and were laughing and telling jokes throughout the day and didn't take it seriously," end quote. Lawrence's father, Larry Sprader, said, quote, "Will there ever be closure? There's never going to be closure, but at least we have some answers," end quote. The next death that we're going to cover involves a 36-year-old woman named Candace Boley, who went by Candy. Candy was a soldier at Fort Hood, but unfortunately, during her time there, she was introduced somehow to crack cocaine. Eventually, Candy was discharged from the Army, and from there, her drug addiction took over her life. After leaving Fort Hood, she bought a home in Killeen nearby, but on July 11th, 2011, she was found murdered in that very house. Sadly, because of Candy's drug addiction, her family believes that there wasn't a lot of effort put into finding her killer. Her family even claimed that the Killeen Police Department didn't even test evidence that they found at the scene. And unfortunately, all these years later, Candy's murder is still unsolved. Now, according to the police department, investigators have had a suspect in her murder since 2015, but an arrest has never been made. Her mom, Terry, said that Candy was, quote, "outgoing, vibrant, and energetic, and she never knew a stranger. I think that was her biggest flaw. She trusted everybody. In this case, she trusted the wrong person." We actually visited Candy's house to show you how close it is to the fort. Take a look at this footage here.
Where we're located right now in the 1000 block of Palmer Avenue here in Killeen, Texas, was once again the gruesome site of another horrific murder of an ex-soldier that was once stationed here at Fort Hood. This time, the murder victim was a woman named Candy Boley. Now, Candy, obviously that was a nickname, was a drug addict, and throughout her life she had been addicted to a number of different substances. But her family claims that when she was found murdered inside her home, right in this immediate area, nobody cared, nobody paid attention. The police didn't even analyze all of the evidence that they collected. It's actually pretty insane when you go through the line items of what exactly the police did and didn't do in the case of the murder of Candy Boley. And obviously, as with all of these things, to this day, Candy's murder remains an unsolved crime. The person who entered her home and shot her to death remains at large, and they've never been officially identified. It's really sad how many of these stories you could tell here in Killeen. How many soldiers have lost their lives, not only to murder, but to unaliving, which obviously we know many times when someone self-unalives, it's not really that. It's someone doing it to them and making it look like they've done it to themselves. It's crazy. This violence and this stench of death has touched every single corner of the city of Killeen, and yet the officials at Fort Hood refuse to comment on this. They refuse to actually investigate these homicides, and they refuse to do anything. It's a shame. A shame on Fort Hood and a shame on the community of Killeen, Texas. Yeah, what more can we do but keep these people's names alive and keep talking about this very sad reality?
Now, obviously, Candy was not at Fort Hood at the time of her murder, but she's one of countless people with ties to Fort Hood who have met a tragic ending. But it seems as if it's not just Fort Hood that holds this dark energy, but the town of Killeen as a whole. For example, Killeen has been plagued with horrible events in the past. For example, the second worst mass shooting in Texas history occurred in Killeen in the year 1991 when a man attacked a Luby's cafeteria, a restaurant, and slaughtered 23 people in cold blood. As a part of this documentary, we visited that location, which is now a Chinese restaurant. Just take a look.
So the curse of Fort Hood isn't necessarily limited to people who are, enlisted in the United States Army or work on Fort Hood itself. To the average person, the building behind me might seem like a normal everyday Chinese buffet. But in the 1990s, this building was the location of one of the most gruesome, prolific mass casualty events, mass shootings in American history. Yes, this is the location of the 1993 Luby's shooting, which occurred here in Killeen, Texas, when a man named George Hennard plowed his truck through those windows right there and began shooting. This is a very, very notorious story. There were people when this happened flooding out of the building, running to these buildings surrounding this Luby's, fleeing for cover. But George was killed at the end of the event, and we kind of understand why he did what he did, but to this day there's a lot of mystery in that story. But it's crazy. Normally with these events like this, the Luby's shooting, even in Columbine, you'll see local authorities or townships actually demolish buildings where these tragedies occur at. But here in this case, the building's the exact same. If you look at the crime scene photos from back in the day, it's the exact same building, just with a new typeface and a new restaurant on the front, but the bones are there. I don't know, I just went in for a moment to check out the interior of the building. I went into the buffet. I've read this story so many times, and Courtney and I recently covered it on our podcast, Murder in America. And it's just such an eerie feeling, knowing that families are eating here, people are eating here. It just seems so normal. But you remember that right where these people are sitting, where they're enjoying this fine Chinese meal, that's where these dead bodies were piled up back in the 90s. Time always heals wounds, but here in Killeen, Texas, this is still a wound that's very much open. And with the gun laws here in Texas and the constant debate in the political sphere about gun rights, what happened here, I don't think will ever be forgotten. As we're here in Killeen, we had to make mention of this because I don't know if you forgot, but there were 2 mass shootings on Fort Hood. So those were incredibly deadly and notorious. And then you have one of the deadliest in American history that also happened in the same town. It's so peculiar and eerie, but we got to keep going.
So, that's kind of just, I don't know, it's crazy that all of these events have happened in Killeen, and there's just so much death and misery in the town. It's really hard to believe, and it's shocking when you spell all of this out and talk about it one event after the other. And in the years after Candy's murder, remember Candy was the woman who was murdered in her house, the case is unsolved, her family came across many other families in Killeen whose loved ones' murders remained unsolved. So much so that Terry, Candy's mother, created a website called murderedinKilleen.com, where she lists the city's murder victims. Terry would later say, quote, "I was so upset that all these people are murdered and nobody knows what they look like, nobody knows their story. All of these victims are people who need to be remembered in some way," end quote. The next case we'll discuss involves 26-year-old specialist Michael Henry Bailey. Michael's family said that he loved everything outdoors, including camping, fishing, and swimming. He had a very adventurous spirit, loved to travel, loved his dog, tattoos, music, but most of all, he loved his young son, Trenton. Now, Michael had joined the military in August 2008 and worked as an air traffic control equipment repairer at Fort Hood. Now, in May of 2011, Michael was deployed to Iraq, and he came back home in November of the same year. Sadly, though, he would only be home for about a month before tragedy struck. 2 days before Christmas, on December 23rd, 2011, Michael Bailey would be found in his home with a gunshot wound, but he wouldn't succumb to his injuries until 6 days later, on December 29th. Strangely, Fort Hood ultimately ruled Michael's death a self-unaliving, but his family disagrees. According to the Military Justice for All website, Michael's loved ones believed that investigators should have looked into his wife, who was allegedly there at the time of the shooting. They claim to this day that his wife had been cheating on him for years, and that she at the time had a motive to kill him: his life insurance policy and the Army payroll. Michael's family also claimed that Michael had planned on kicking her out of his home that very day. He had told them that that's what he was going to do. On the website, they wrote that investigators never interrogated his wife, they never checked her for gunshot residue, and they wouldn't even bother to open up a formal investigation. Now, again, I don't have a lot of information on this case. I'm not making any claims whatsoever, but Michael Bailey's death does come up when you look up suspicious deaths from Fort Hood. But I also think that it's important to mention how prevalent self-unaliving is for service members. According to Boston University, in a recent study released by the Pentagon, US soldiers are more likely to die by self-unaliving than anything else. So that in itself is a tragedy that needs to be looked into. Something is going deeply wrong here. These men and women go into this field wanting to serve our country, wanting to serve us, the American people. So it's heartbreaking to think that somewhere along the way, the stress of their position is too much for them to bear. And it seems like that's especially the case for people at Fort Hood. Like I've mentioned, there's a darkness there. But the next tragic story we have to talk about is Fort Hood's mass shooting. In 2009, Fort Hood would be thrust into the national spotlight again when Army psychiatrist Nidal Hasan opened fire at Fort Hood's Soldier Readiness Processing Center. In the end, after methodically going through and shooting anybody he could see, 14 people would lose their lives and over 30 were injured, including the gunman Nidal Hasan, who ultimately survived. This massacre was national news and was devastating for the town of Killeen, Texas. It was an attack on home soil at an army base in the heart of Texas.
There has been a mass shooting at an Army base in Texas, Fort Hood in Central Texas. The Army now telling us 7 people have been killed, more than a dozen injured. One of the shootings happening at a personnel and medical processing center, the second apparently occurring in a theater. There are very few details beyond that.
We've had a terrible tragedy here at Fort Hood today. The situation is ongoing, although I think we have positive news that we're very close to a resolution. At approximately 13:30 hours today, a shooter entered what we call the Soldier Readiness Facility, where soldiers who are preparing to deploy go for last-minute medical checkups and dental treatment, etc. Shooter opened fire and essentially, due to the quick response of the police forces, was killed. At this time, the numbers that we're looking at are 12 dead and 31 wounded, and they're dispersed among the local hospitals here in the Central Texas area. As I said, the shooter was killed. He was a soldier. We since then have apprehended 2 additional soldiers that are suspects. And I would go into the point that there were eyewitness accounts that there may have been more than one shooter. They tracked the suspected individuals to an adjacent facility and they were apprehended.
Authorities have not yet ruled out the possibility that Hasan was working as part of a larger plot. But right now, FBI agents have searched his apartment overnight, but he has still not been questioned by investigators. Security cameras show Hasan yesterday in a convenience store where he had breakfast every day, going about his usual routine. He is an American citizen said to be of Jordanian descent and a lifelong Muslim. His records show he studied at Walter Reed Army Medical Center outside Washington, D.C. The Associated Press says he received a poor performance rating there for, quote, difficulties that required counseling and extra supervision. The motive is still unclear. Hasan was apparently about to deploy to Iraq.
Apparently he was very upset and angry that it had been known for the last few days.
The cruel irony is that Hasan is a psychiatrist who is supposed to be helping other soldiers deal with their mental health problems. Relatives in Virginia issued a statement when they still thought Hasan had been killed, saying, Nidal was an American citizen. He was born in Arlington, Virginia. Our family loves America. We are proud of our country and saddened by today's tragedy.
This enemy was within, and that's what makes it so hard.
It's difficult enough when we lose these brave Americans in battles overseas. It is horrifying that they should come under fire at an Army base on American soil.
Relatives say Hasan had been harassed by other soldiers for being Muslim and had been trying unsuccessfully to get out of the Army. But only Hasan knows for sure why he did what he did, and so far, Harry, he's not talking. A retired colonel who served with Hasan has been quoted as saying that he heard Hasan react with glee to a news report that several American soldiers had been killed by a bomber.
And keep in mind that this was decades after that mass shooting at the Luby's that killed 23 people in 1991. Anytime a mass shooting occurs, it takes years for the town to pick up the pieces left from the tragedy. After that 1991 Luby's shooting, it seemed as if Killeen was finally starting to get back on its feet. But then the second one hit, devastating them all over again. And sadly, the 2009 mass shooting wouldn't be their last. In 2014, a different soldier would shoot up Fort Hood, and his name was Specialist Ivan Lopez. Lopez was born on October 23, 1979 in Puerto Rico. When he was 19 years old, he decided to enlist in the Puerto Rico National Guard. Then in 2003, he moved to America and started serving as an infantryman at Fort Hood. From what I could tell, during his first few years of service, Ivan was considered a good soldier. In 2007, he spent a 12-month deployment in Sinai, and then again in 2011, he was deployed to Iraq to help with Operation New Dawn. He ended up coming home from that deployment in December of 2011, and according to those who knew him, this is when he started showing a rapid mental decline. In the months after coming home from deployment, Lopez was given a job as a team leader, but that position was then taken from him and given to someone else who they thought was more qualified, and this seemed to really affect him. Lopez started going to counseling for it, in addition to the PTSD he was experiencing from his time in the Middle East. Now, it's been reported that during his service, Lopez somehow got a traumatic brain injury, and as we all know, that can really affect people, especially someone who already had PTSD. According to the people who knew Lopez, he also suffered from depression and anxiety, and he had issues sleeping. But then in October of 2013, his grandfather passed away, and a month after that, his mother died. Now, Lopez tried to get some time off work so he could attend his mother's funeral, but there was a 5-day delay in getting it approved, and this seemed to have caused some tension. Over the next few months, Lopez's mental health took a turn for the worse. In addition to the grief he was experiencing from losing his mother, he was also having financial difficulties, and he was in the process of trying to move his wife and daughter into a new apartment. So in April of 2014, he applied for a 10-day leave so he could help his family move, but he ran into some problems. The paperwork he filled out had some errors, and over the next few days, Lopez went back and forth with Fort Hood officials trying to get his leave approved, but they kept delaying it. On April 2nd, Lopez went to the Fort Hood offices once again, where he learned that his leave had been denied. The reasoning was that his family already had housing established in town, so he didn't need, technically, a 10-day leave. And when Lopez heard this, he was fuming. He even got into a verbal altercation with a few soldiers and quickly stormed out of the building to smoke a cigarette. From there, he went back home and grabbed his .45 caliber pistol. When his wife saw him with the gun, he told her he was going shooting after work, but that wasn't true. He was about to go shooting at work. Soon enough, Lopez was back at Fort Hood's headquarters, where he started another verbal argument. Then, at around 4:15, he pulled out his pistol and began shooting people in the office. Now, during this initial bout of gunfire, Lopez shot his main targets, the 3 soldiers that he had been arguing with over the last few days, their names being Wilfred Sanchez, Jonathan Westbrook, and Warren Harnett. But surprisingly, they would all survive. However, Lopez didn't stop with them. He actually shot and injured several people in the office that day, clearly sending a message that he was not happy with Fort Hood. After shooting up the office area, he walked towards a back conference room where Sergeant First Class Daniel Ferguson was barricading the door. Now, Ferguson had never had any altercations with Lopez, but that didn't matter. Lopez was ready for bloodshed. The door to the conference room didn't lock, so Ferguson and a few others were pushing their bodies up against it to try and keep it shut. Lopez approached the conference room door and fired several shots through it. Ultimately, 39-year-old Daniel Ferguson was shot and killed. Sergeant First Class Daniel Ferguson had been working at Fort Hood as their transportation supervisor, and throughout his time in the military, he proved himself to be a loyal soldier for over a decade. He served 2 deployments to Kuwait in 2003, then again in 2004. Then in 2009, he was sent to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Then finally in 2012, he was deployed to Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Throughout his time in the service, Ferguson had earned 37 different awards and decorations. On the day of the shooting, several people who were in the conference room said that if it wasn't for Ferguson, they all would have died that day. And there were 14 people in that room. One person said, if he wasn't the one standing there holding those doors closed, that shooter would have been able to get through and shoot everyone else. I know that he did have the pleasure of serving. This was his life. He was proud to be part of a great service. Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Hirsch said, until a particular situation happens, none of us consider with certainty how we'll react. We can envision ourselves as heroes, keeping our cool under fire, but the reality is the world has precious few people who are so selfless, so calm, and so brave that they would put their lives on the line so others may live. Sergeant First Class Ferguson is a hero. After shooting Ferguson, Ivan Lopez actually left the building and got into his car. He was now on a full-blown killing spree, attempting to take down anyone he could.
We have an active shooter currently on on Fort Hood, so we have multiple gunshot victims. We also have people that are escaping through windows.
As he drove down the road, Lopez spotted someone standing on 73rd Street. He quickly pulled up next to them, rolled his window down, and fired 3 shots through his car window. The victim's name was redacted, but they would ultimately survive. Next, he would park his car outside of Fort Hood's motor pool where he had been assigned, and after walking inside, Lopez shot at 2 soldiers, grazing one of them in the head. He then encountered 37-year-old Sergeant Timothy Wayne Owens. Upon seeing the gunman, Timothy tried to talk Lopez down, but in response, Lopez lifted his gun and fired at Owens' body. Sadly, Owens would die. Timothy's loved ones said that no matter what he went through, he always persevered. He also loved helping others through their dark times, which is very evident, considering that he tried to talk the gunman down that day. Even with a gun pointed directly at him, Timothy did what he could to try and ease the gunman's pain. But sadly, he was shot point blank 5 times. Timothy's mother told the Washington Post, "He was a brave man." His friend, Mike Myers, said, "He was always the person you could go talk to. He'd give you solutions. He'd listen to everybody. He was just that type of guy." Sadly, Timothy Owens left behind a loving wife and daughter. After shooting Timothy Wayne Owens, Lopez then returned to his car and drove around Fort Hood again, shooting at any random person he saw walking around. And he ended up parking once more and entered yet another building. Inside, he shot 3 more soldiers, one of whom would die instantly, 38-year-old Staff Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez. Like the shooter, Ivan Lopez, Carlos Rodriguez was also from Puerto Rico, and at just 18 years old, he decided to enlist. According to people who knew Carlos, they said he was fearless, especially when it came to jumping out of airplanes. But Devin Dawes would later say, he seemed from a distance like he was hard and tough on people, but he wasn't at all. He took care of me. Carlos was the type of person who gave his all with everything he did, but he also really cared for others. He loved to laugh and joke around, and he never took life too seriously. His loved ones said he loved the Star Wars movies, and he even collected Star Wars bobblehead figures. Sadly, Carlos was planning to retire soon after almost serving the country for 20 years, but he would never get that chance. Back at Fort Hood, we're about 8 minutes into the shooting. Ivan Lopez had already killed 3 people and injured 14. After killing Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Lopez returned to his car again and drove to a nearby parking lot, and that's where he encountered an unidentified military police officer. The officer fired off a shot at Lopez, which ultimately missed, but at that moment, Lopez knew that his reign of terror had come to an end. So it's here where he suddenly decided to lift his pistol to his head and pull the trigger. In total, Lopez fired 34 rounds, 11 at Fort Hood headquarters, 9 in the motor pool building, 5 in the last building, and 5 from his vehicle. Now, like the 2009 Fort Hood mass shooting, Ivan Lopez was in uniform when he began the spree. Both shootings lasted around 10 minutes, but unlike the 2009 massacre, this shooting was at several locations around the base. Now, during the shooting, when officials were alerted, Fort Hood tweeted out a shelter in place. But by then, the damage had already been done. When first responders arrived at the scenes, they quickly took the wounded to the Carl R. Darnell Army Medical Center and began alerting the deceased victims' family members. Now, the investigation into the shooting would reveal that Ivan Lopez had been showing signs of mental decline for years. Not only was he suffering from PTSD and grief from losing family members, but he was also struggling financially. There were also reports that he had been asked to be transferred because he was being taunted and picked on by other soldiers. 1 month before the shooting occurred, Lopez had purchased his pistol from Guns Galore, the same exact weapons store where Nidal Hassan, the shooter from 2009, purchased his weapons before the massacre. But soon enough, the entire world was learning that yet another mass shooting had taken place at Fort Hood. This one wasn't as deadly as the first, but as you can imagine, it was incredibly devastating to hear that history had repeated itself.
The Army base at Fort Hood, Texas, dealing with yet another deadly shooting Wednesday evening. A senior military official reports 14 people are injured on the base. The Texas base was the scene of a mass shooting in 2009. It remains the deadliest attack at a domestic military base in U.S. history.
Tragedy strikes again. The Army's largest U.S. base put on lockdown for hours as shots rang out Wednesday. The second deadliest shooting on the Fort Hood military base in Texas in nearly 5 years.
It's really unreal. Really unreal.
because in 2009 I was here and this thing happened again.
Authorities scrambled to the scene, shutting the front gates, backing up traffic, urging everyone to stay put.
Seek shelter immediately.
The lone shooter identified as Specialist Ivan Lopez, an American soldier toting a .45 caliber Smith & Wesson semi-automatic handgun purchased recently.
He was undergoing behavioral health and psychiatric treatment for depression and anxiety and a variety of other psychological and psychiatric issues.
Dressed in combat fatigue, Lopez allegedly opened fire, killing 3 people and injuring more than a dozen. Victims were airlifted to nearby hospitals.
Any shooting is troubling. Obviously, this reopens the pain of what happened at Fort Hood 5 years ago.
Fort Hood, the site of so much pain in 2009, when Major Nidal Hassan opened fire on base, killing 13 people and injuring 32. President Obama's touching words on the events of that tragic day almost 5 years ago, sadly relevant again.
So we say goodbye to those who now belong to eternity. May God bless the memory of those that we have lost.
Within just 23 years, Killeen, Texas had been the site of 3 separate massacres, killing 40 people in total, injuring 74, and traumatizing thousands. And that's a pretty cut and dry case of murder and death at Fort Hood, the 2009 shooting and this shooting. But now we have to get back into the realm of conspiracy and strangeness. The stories that I'm about to tell you are going to shock you, are going to disturb you, are going to confuse you, and are going to have you questioning just about everything. The next case from Fort Hood happened in January of 2016. It was just days into the new year, but for the Schuette family, it was everything but a happy time. You see, 35-year-old Staff Sergeant Devin Schuette had been missing. His family last saw him on New Year's Day. His wife Tanny said that he left their home to go get some food, and on the way he had called her. But during their phone call, he abruptly hung up the phone, and that was the last time she heard from him. Now, Tanny saw that his cell phone had pinged in this extremely remote part of town. So, late that evening, she and her mother went out there to look for him. The area that it brought them to was literally in the middle of nowhere, off of a dirt road. And as they were looking for Devin, they saw this light flash up ahead. Now, they assumed that this was a search party, since Devin had been missing for several days. And when they follow the light, they eventually run into this man who's holding the flashlight. The man told Tanny that he was looking for his friend, but something they couldn't help but notice was that this man was incredibly intoxicated. Even more concerning, though, was the fact that this man's face was covered in blood. Immediately, she calls the police, and soon enough, they arrive to speak with this strange man. But after talking with him, the police tell Tanny that he was simply a local cattle rancher who had been injured by a tree branch. Tanny was definitely suspicious, especially because days later, on January 3rd, Staff Sergeant Devin Schuette was found deceased inside the cab of his pickup truck, about 5 miles away at the Belton Lake Outdoor Recreation Area. When he was found, they saw that he was covered in a blanket. There was also a pipe that had been connected to his exhaust that ran to the inside of the truck. Then, to secure the pipe, a blanket had also been stuffed around the window. So, in the end, Fort Hood investigators, seeing this, ruled Devin's death a self-unaliving. But that doesn't exactly make sense. The biggest mystery of all were the wounds that covered Devin's body. Now, believe it or not, this is crazy. Devin had 9 stab wounds on his body, some of which were on his hands and forearms, which clearly show that he was trying to defend himself from somebody. None of it made sense whatsoever. Devin's wife, Tanny, would later say his final cause of death was asphyxiation. The reason I think this is a cover-up, not just with my husband but several other soldiers and maybe other civilians, is my husband was stabbed 9 times and had defense wounds. My husband supposedly stabbed himself before taking his own life. Another thing that Tanny couldn't ignore was that bloody man she ran into on the night of her husband's disappearance. Devin's phone had pinged right in that area where she had encountered him. But sadly, even after she called the police, the man was never taken down to the station for questioning. They didn't take a blood sample, nor did they give her the name of the supposed rancher. In fact, Tanny would later say that at one point that evening, when she approached the police officers, one even pulled a gun on her. They also forced her to delete all the photographs she had taken on her cell phone of the crime scene that evening. Tanny said, "The whole investigation and the way they conducted themselves was a shit show." Now, Tanny wanted an independent investigation into Devin's death, but as of today, That has never happened. When Devin's body was returned to his family, Tanny said that it was wrapped like a mummy. For her, Fort Hood needed an overhaul in how they handled soldiers who went missing and how they protect the family members. She said, "I've gotten to a point where it's too much, but someone has to put their neck out there for the safety of everybody else." According to Tanny, and now this is interesting, Devin had top secret clearance, and she believed that he may have come across alarming information that someone else didn't want him to see and definitely didn't want him to tell people about. So, a man with top secret clearance randomly decides to self-delete. He's found with defensive wounds on his body. A bloody man is seen in the area on the evening he goes missing. He's never questioned. The police make the wife of the dead man delete photographs from her devices, and they never investigated. And this guy's got top secret clearance at the nearby fort. And just about 6 months after the death of Devin Schuette, another tragedy would strike Fort Hood. In June of 2016, a huge storm ran through Killeen, Texas. For days in the area, there was torrential rain and flooding, but the soldiers at Fort Hood still had to go to work. On June 2nd, a tactical vehicle holding 12 Fort Hood soldiers began driving through the nearby wilderness. One of the soldiers inside, named Cameron Robinson, said that he had reservations about the training given the weather that day. He even asked the platoon leader, "Did you not see the flash flooding warnings we've been getting? Are you sure we should be going out there?" But they insisted. Soon enough, they would approach Owl Creek, and they attempted to cross it. But with the rising waters, their 2.5-ton vehicle became stuck. A witness in a nearby vehicle that was following behind would later recall watching this happen and thinking to themselves, "My God, they're not actually thinking about crossing that, are they?" But sadly, they did. And before they knew it, the vehicle was quickly swept away in the floodwaters. Cameron Robinson said, "We're sitting there and the vehicle is slowly moving, and all of a sudden water started hitting our feet, and I'm thinking, okay, a little bit of water, we're just going to go over it and that will be it." The water started rising and rising, and it got to my kneecaps, and everybody started panicking a little bit. Robinson said that he tried to calm everyone down, but it was hard because the water was quickly rising. Within seconds, it went from knee level to waist level, and then to chest level. He yelled out to his fellow soldiers that panicking can lead to drowning, but soon enough, the vehicle was completely submerged. Robinson said, "I'm hanging onto the bars on the top, and I just feel the whole truck rolling, thinking to myself that I'm about to just drown in a military vehicle in a training accident." Now, there were soldiers behind who witnessed this happen, and they quickly ran to try and help. But one man said, debris was moving faster than a man could run. Eventually, they watched as the vehicle popped back up out of the water, and Cameron Robinson, who was inside, said that when this happened, he looked up, and there were only 3 soldiers still alive. Tragically, 9 of the soldiers that day had drowned.
Well, all 9 soldiers who were killed in a training accident at Fort Hood, Texas, have been identified. They were killed Thursday when floodwaters flipped their truck as they tried to cross a creek.
Specialist Christine Armstrong, 27 of 29 Palms, California. She entered active duty in 2014. Private First Class Brandon Banner, 22 of Milton, Florida. He was a humble man, his mother said, someone people flocked to. Staff Sergeant Miguel Colon Vasquez, 38 of Brooklyn, New York. He served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Private Isaac DeLeon of San Angelo, Texas was 19 and engaged according to his Facebook page. His fiancée wrote, "He swore to protect his country, and I swore to protect his heart." Private First Class Zachary Fuller, 23 of Palmetto, Florida. He was awarded a National Defense Service Medal and Terrorism Service Medal. Private Eddie Ray Lauren Gates of Dunn, North Carolina. She was her high school's homecoming queen, a 20-year-old girl named after her father.
She said, "Father, I'm going to do 20 years.
Yeah.
I was wanting her to go in another branch, but she said, no. I want to go in the Army. That's what I want to do."
Private Tyshina James, 21 of Jersey City, New Jersey. She was awarded a Global War on Terrorism Medal. Specialist Ying Ming Sun, 25 of Monterey Park, California, recognized for serving the U.S. overseas. And 21-year-old Mitchell Winey of Valparaiso, Indiana. He was a West Point cadet, training with active duty soldiers. The Army says the accident that killed the 9 soldiers happened Thursday morning. They were in a tactical vehicle like this one that became stuck while the truck's driver was attempting to cross a creek. It was swept away in flash flooding and overturned. 3 soldiers were rescued and have been cleared to return to duty. Today in the city of Killeen, where Fort Hood is based, church services honored the 9 dead. 8 of the 9 soldiers killed were actually truck operators. Elaine, we have since learned that when the accident happened, officials here at Fort Hood were actually in the process of deciding whether or not to close some of the paved roads here at Fort Hood because of that flash flooding.
A later investigation revealed that one of the soldiers had ignored the warning signs and had ordered the tactical vehicle to drive through the floodwaters. But there were also failures at Fort Hood itself. Cameron Robinson said that the platoon leader, who insisted that they conduct the training that day, would later visit him in the hospital. Robinson said, quote, "He came in crying, but I was like, don't give me none of that, because we could have avoided all of this had he just simply listened to us," end quote. Surprisingly, Robinson was also issued a gag order, with Fort Hood essentially telling him that he wasn't allowed to talk about what happened to anyone. But they also never once interviewed him about the incident. They never really investigated it. Robinson said that this entire experience completely changed him. Not only did he have PTSD and survivor's guilt, but he also felt like the Army didn't really care about him after the accident. In fact, the platoon leader who set that training in motion was even promoted. So, a platoon leader, through reckless behavior, gets 9 of his soldiers killed during a training exercise, and he's promoted. Make that make sense. The next incident that happened at Fort Hood took place on October 10th, 2016. That day, Private Dakota Stump was completing a field training exercise, and during this, he took a little break, but he never returned from that break. Now, officials did look for him this time. They searched his barracks and other areas around the military installation, but they didn't find him. And 2 days later, the Army reported him as AWOL, absent without leave. Fort Hood spokesperson Christopher Hogg stated that a search was initiated after Dakota failed to report for formation. When asked if specific areas like the motor pool, roads around the base, and other areas of Fort Hood were searched, Christopher Hogg did not elaborate. It was later revealed to his family members that his cell phone had pinged off a phone tower over 1,000 miles away in Indianapolis, Indiana. So that's why they believed he had abandoned post. But his mother, Patricia Franklin, stated, "I just feel that they did not take it seriously. It was almost like they didn't want to come and say, 'We think your kid's goofing off.'" It was later discovered that Fort Hood had accidentally used the wrong phone number when tracking him. As it turns out, Dakota had not been in Indiana. He had been in Killeen the entire time. 3 weeks after his disappearance, soldiers located Dakota's dead body near his Ford Mustang during a land navigation exercise. And by then, he was in a state of decomposition. But they knew that it was him because he was still wearing an Army uniform with the name Stump across the chest. Apparently, Dakota had passed away after he missed a left turn while speeding at the base. His Ford Mustang allegedly flew through the air until it made impact with a tree line, flipping and ejecting him before coming to a stop in the woods. Now, when Dakota's family learned that he had been on the military base that entire time, they were shocked. They had also been under the impression that Fort Hood had thoroughly looked for him, when clearly they didn't. Dakota's mother, Patricia, said, "I think it's so important to have a team of trained individuals that know how to act quickly and to start actually searching for these people. Let's find them before something bad happens, you know?" Fort Hood, though, was quick to classify Dakota as AWOL, and they put absolutely little to no effort in finding him. It was later determined through the cell phone records and witness statements that Dakota had driven to an on-post shop at around 6:30 p.m. that day and had one of his 21-year-old friends purchase Pinnacle vodka for him. Dakota wasn't due back to the motor pool until 9:50 p.m., so he drank vodka in his barracks and texted his girlfriend at 9 p.m. saying, "Drunk as f***." One witness heard Dakota peel out of the barracks parking lot in his Mustang, and another witness saw him run a red light on base. According to an official CID investigative report, Stump had been traveling at 62 miles per hour when he missed a sharp left bend in the road and drove straight into the trees at a 20% incline. There, his car hit a dirt mound, went airborne again for about 100 feet, hit the ground again, and launched 50 more feet before hitting a tree stump and rolling another 70 feet before coming to rest on its side. His vehicle flipped multiple times before landing on its side more than 200 feet into the woods. Private Stump was thrown from the vehicle, landing 10 feet from the car. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt and had apparently died from blunt force injuries, the report said, and a toxicology screen came back negative. Now, due to the state of decomposition when his body was found, it was almost impossible to locate traces of alcohol. The lab was forced to use a piece of his calf muscle for the toxicology report, and dental records were used to make an accurate identification of his body. Interestingly though, Dakota's U-shaped hyoid bone in his neck was missing, despite his body being relatively intact after the accident. And interestingly enough, the hyoid bone is often analyzed to determine if someone has been strangled. Usually when your hyoid bone is missing or destroyed, it means that someone's been strangled to death. You can look at the case of Jeffrey Epstein to see some details about that sort of a thing. Strangely enough, it was also determined that there had been no animal activity in the area, so what happened to Dakota's hyoid bone? This, to this day, remains a mystery. And although Dakota's family members now knew the truth as to what had allegedly happened to him, an administrative error at Fort Hood regarding his cell phone number had caused a complete stall into the investigation, and Dakota was classified as AWOL. They eventually corrected their mistake and changed him back to present for duty, and Dakota's mother was able to collect survivor's benefits. But it is strange. When you dive into this world and you think about all of these things, let's say Dakota, if we're hypothesizing, let's say someone did kill Dakota. Maybe there was some sort of a reasoning behind him being murdered. That's why his hyoid bone would be missing, he was strangled, and the entire thing was staged. It would be great for people to cover up a crime if they were to classify someone as being missing for weeks so that the body could decompose, all the crime scene evidence could, be carried away or washed away or whatever, destroyed by animals and wildlife, and so that it would give them time to get stories straight. It's all just pretty strange, isn't it? 2 months after Dakota Stump's death, another Fort Hood soldier would be found dead in her car. 21-year-old Private Paige Briles had joined the Army in February 2015 as a wheeled vehicle mechanic, but before basic training, she was by another military member. However, like many before her, she didn't report the sexual assault out of fear. Paige would go on to experience a lot of trauma during her time in the military. While at Fort Hood, she was assigned to the Warrior Transition Unit at the Carl R. Darnell Army Medical Center, but her mental health was struggling. In August of 2016, she was hospitalized for 28 days, and during that time, she decided that it was best to leave the military. Like I mentioned before, according to many, Fort Hood has a dark energy of its own. Many soldiers go into their careers there excited and motivated, but after spending some time at Fort Hood, oftentimes all of that changes. For Paige, she had made up her mind, and in February of 2017, she was expected to be discharged. Her plans were to move back home to Louisiana and work as a dental hygienist. However, she would never make it, because on Christmas Eve of 2016, Paige was found stabbed to death inside of her vehicle in the driveway of a friend's house. Originally, CID investigated Paige's death as a homicide, but they later ruled it a self-deletion, which didn't make any sense to her loved ones. They knew that she had struggled with mental health in the past, but they were adamant that she would not have self-deleted, especially in that way. They asked the CID to reopen her case, and they even gave the CID a person of interest who they thought could have been responsible in the murder of their daughter. However, the lead was never investigated. And to this very day, her death is still ruled a self-unaliving. Now, before we get into the deaths in 2017, we have to talk about one specific soldier. For this video, I interviewed a woman whose own family member died an incredibly mysterious death in the year 2016, who at the time was enlisted at Fort Hood. This is a crazy, disturbing story that needs resolution, and it's really gonna piss you off. But I'm gonna let her take us away.
My name is Tequila Cusero. I live here in Michigan. I'm the mother of one, and I'm going to be, talking today about my cousin, Marcus Nelson, who passed away just outside of Fort Hood 9 years ago today, in May 23rd, 2016.
So before we get into this, I do want to say that is quite the coincidence that it's actually the anniversary of his passing today.
It means a lot because usually on Memorial Day, I put his picture up and we have family over. Marcus was serving in the Army, I believe for 12 years. Before that, he was here in Michigan. He worked at the Wayne County Sheriff's Department with my dad. So my dad, a couple of my uncles, they all worked at the Wayne County Sheriff Department when I was younger. Marcus even stayed with my dad for some time when they were working together. So, and he's my dad's first cousin, and so my second cousin. So we have like a group of cousins that are all around my dad, and then a group of cousins that are in my age range. And so Marcus is like my second cousin. And so, you know, we became close over the years, especially as he was traveling in the military. My family was also in the military. My stepfather was in the Air Force. So I lived in Okinawa, Japan with them for a while. So me and my cousin would trade stories by email, you know, talking about our travels and just talking about the world really, because at that particular time, like 2014, 2015, you had like the deaths of like Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin. So we were talking a lot about the Black Lives Matter movement and police reform and those type of things. So we were always staying connected. My husband is also in the military. I met him while I was living in Japan. So he was in the Marine Corps at the time. So we just had, as I got older, me and my cousin had more in common to talk about. And so, you know, we would connect here and there. And we were talking by Facebook a few weeks before we found out that he passed away. And I mean, he didn't say anything to us like to make us think that something was going on, but all of a sudden he started to make these posts on Facebook. And he would say, like, there's something going on with the leadership and Fort Hood. And he said, I'm taking a poll of, you know, other people that he served with on, are you just gonna go along with the things that are being done? Or are you gonna stand up for what's right? So he was like, I'm seriously asking, you know, my people that I'm serving with, you know, what do you do? And a couple weeks later, I get a call from one of my aunts that Marcus died. And everybody's like, what? Like, how do you just, like, no forewarning? He wasn't sick. Like, what do you mean he died? What we had come to find out was that we don't know exactly what happened on base, but something happened on base. So, like, we know as much as anybody else knows because we read articles about what happened, right? So if you look on Army Times, you can find articles about what happened to him. So apparently I wouldn't say charged, but he left his post. They listed another thing, like he gotten into, I guess, an argument with a superior and left his post, apparently is what happened. And they use the military language to describe, you know, what that is. But basically, he had gotten into it with a superior officer and I guess left his post. That's what they said. Again, I don't know for sure. But then somehow he ended up in an off-base jail in Bell County. And so we're like, wait, how did something happen on base and he end up in an off-base jail? And in that jail, he died. You don't just die in jail. So what happened? And so to this day, like, I don't have his death certificate. I'm his cousin, so I'm not his next of kin. I don't have his death certificate. So I don't even know. I'm not even sure how he died. I don't know if they say like, none of that stuff has been reported. And again, because me and Marcus had been talking about all this stuff with, you know, other people dying in police custody, for it to happen to him was such a heartbreak. Under these circumstances, this man serving it. My cousin was 45. He wasn't like some young guy that just joined the military. Like, he had been in for 12 years. He was 45 years old. And everyone that we spoke with and that posted about him talked about he was a leader. Like, he was a true leader. So for him to get to a point where he left his duty station and got into it with a superior officer, I just don't know what could have happened for that to happen. And then for him to end up in a jail, not on base, and then subsequently end up being shipped back to us in a box. It's been heartbreaking, and all of us feel it, because every time Marcus would be off, he would come home. You know, he would spend a lot of time with my grandmother. He would invite us all over, like, we would do a barbecue and just hang out. Like, my family's we just laugh all the time. Like, we're all comedians. All we do is crack jokes with each other. And so, like, we missed him. Like, he was a person in our life that you would miss. He was a big character with big energy. And if you look at his obituary page, the people posting about him. If you look at his page, the videos people post about him. I saved this one video that one of the people he served with made of him, and it was such a beautiful, beautiful video. People loved him. And so for him to die under those circumstances and everybody go, what? What happened? How did he get arrested? What? It doesn't make sense.
Let's go back to before he, whatever they accused him of doing, abandons his post. What do you remember that he was talking about? Like, what was he posting about specifically with Fort Hood? Because that's pretty bizarre that he was, making allegations against a very corrupt institution before his death. What was he saying? Like, what had he seen or what had he heard?
I didn't get a chance to talk to him after he made that last post about Fort Hood. Right, because he passed away like 2 weeks later. So kind of leading up to that, he would, he had made other little posts, and he's like, it seemed like posts where he's like he feel like he's fighting something alone. Like he feels like he didn't have any support. He even posted that other people, because of what was going on at Fort Hood, other people were being driven to leaving the Army because of what was going on with the leadership in particular. He didn't go into detail in that particular post about what was going on, but it seems he was trying to communicate that he felt like he was fighting it on his own. Like he didn't have a lot of support. And so I think that was his way of reaching out when he basically did a poll where he's asking people would you stand up? Like, what would you do? Would you keep going along with the flow, or would you stand up for what's right? I think he was looking for support. Like, for him to come out and publicly say that, my cousin was a strong person. I can't imagine what was going on that he would publicly make that post to see what kind of support he could get, and if he was in him standing up to it. So that's as much as I know. Again, there was almost no time in between that post and him dying for us to even have a conversation with him.
So he is talking about something that is happening that he doesn't agree with at Fort Hood, and he's asking people that he knows, through Facebook, what would you do essentially in this situation? Would you go with it, or would you stand up and do the right thing? He never specified what he was talking about.
No. I'm not even sure how many more posts he made before he died, but he didn't specify exactly. And I can imagine that even him saying that was scary for him. Everything in the military, because, I was a military dependent, I understand you can be ostracized and really get in trouble for publicly posting about things that are going on. So he had to be in a desperate spot to do that in the first place. Like I said, he's not a young guy, he's 45 years old, so almost a middle-aged man, basically asking for help or what he should do.
And he's, at this point in his life, he's had a lot of experience with whether it's law enforcement or in the military itself. So he's kind of seen a lot. So if something,
He's traveled around the world. He was serving in Afghanistan during the war. That man has seen a lot. So what happened at Fort Hood that would have broke him?
Exactly. Something in my mind would have had to have been really wrong for somebody to start posting like that, especially like you said, publicly, when your superior at the base or whoever could see those posts. And I don't know if they would give you disciplinary action. I'm not too familiar with how all of that works. That's the other question. Do you think that those posts would have gotten him disciplinary action or something from his superiors at Fort Hood? Do they care about that sort of a thing?
I'm not sure. Again, that's one base that I've never been to. So yeah, I'm not sure about that.
The timing on all this it's one of those things where it's too bizarre to not be some sort of a bigger story, with all the posts and then what happens. So when it comes to what about what actually happened to him, you don't know anything about how he ended up off base. He just went from point A on Fort Hood to the jail.
And part of that, I think, is because we're not next of kin, so they wouldn't just release that information to us. So now kind of my fight with my family is figuring out how we can get that information. I don't care how long it's been. I don't care that it's been 9 years. Life gets in the way. I started a family, and, a lot of us, some of us moved away and whatnot, but what happened to him was not right. And it doesn't make sense at the end of the day. And so I don't care how long it's been. I want to make sure that we find out each step of how this happened, who was involved, and really what started it. Because we don't know what even caused the incident for him to be arrested and then taken off base. You know, as far as we know, as far as our knowledge, he'd never been in trouble in the 12 years. He got commendation, and to get in trouble and then die, that it doesn't make sense.
And what about before this happened? How did he seem to you when you were talking to him? Did anybody notice anything that was weird or off?
No, he seemed to be doing well. Like, he was traveling. I'm not sure how long he was at Fort Hood before this all happened. He was like, we would talk when he was like in Germany. He loved being out there in Germany. I think that was one of his favorite places to be. But he loved coming home. So he was always looking forward to coming back and spending time with my grandmother. His mother, my grandmother's, yes, my second cousin, so my grandmother's sister passed away in 2012. And my grandmother lives in the house they used to live in, Marcus and them and his family. So Marcus would always, that's his home too. So he would always come home and stay with my grandmother. And so we all would kind of come there. So there was no change that I could see until those posts started, right? So right around that time, he would post certain things like a lone wolf. You know, he's like, I guess sometimes you have to be the lone person and stand out on your own to be different from the rest. Like, he started posting things like that. They're still on his page today. So I think he was, I don't know, maybe he was moving into feeling really uncomfortable about whatever he was saying at Fort Hood. And so he would just kind of make these little posts. I guess to kind of describe feeling like I'm out on a limb here. I'm out on my own here.
Yeah, and that's what I've gathered from researching and talking to different people at this point is that was the culture of Fort Hood. Is there was so much happening there and so many, bad things, especially when it comes to assault. Like, there was a massive problem there of women that were being or, even just touched or groped inappropriately by superiors that, when you get to Vanessa Guillen and there was another woman who died, both of them had talked about being before their deaths. So I have no doubt in my mind that sort of a thing had been happening there for a really long time. So there's so many things that go through my mind that, he could have potentially seen or become aware of that were happening there.
I don't think he was worried. I think he was worried about people. Like, I think it seems to me there were people confiding in him who felt isolated, right? And coming to him because he is this big character and felt comfortable that these people were being like driven to depression and driven to anxiety. Like he said, people are being driven to commit or leave the military altogether. And so my guess is that knowing the type of person my cousin is and that people could confide in him, that maybe he was trying to speak for those people too, especially the younger ones.
That's a whole conversation in itself. There are these that have happened at Fort Hood that definitely, when you look at them, people that were killed, there's no doubt that some of these people were murdered and then it was declared, falsely. But then there's also the angle when you look at all of this of, there was so much, like he was talking about, depression and anxiety. Even the people who were making it aware or making their superiors aware that they were going through this, they weren't receiving the help that they needed or the resources. And in my opinion, the blood is on the hands of the people at Fort Hood for not handling all of these things the correct way, whether or not someone actually or not. It all goes back to them and what was happening. When you found out he died, you still don't know to this day, and it was never reported, no one told anyone in your family how he died in the jail?
I can't find it. I can't find the information. None of that information was made public. I don't know. It just was, this is what was going on. And then that there was a death of a Fort Hood soldier. This is what happened. And that was it.
So he makes these posts, he disappears from the base, and then he winds up in jail dead. The sequence of events there, and for them to not give any more information is, in my mind, just looking at it, highly suspicious. I don't know. I'm not insinuating anything, but it's just so odd that they wouldn't even release like a cause of death or details about what had happened. So it's bizarre actually, because usually when something like that happens, they do release that information immediately, especially when someone dies in like police custody. That's something that they usually make available to the public pretty quickly. But I also couldn't find anything. So when you found out that information, what was your initial feeling, and what was that like for your family?
It was shock first and heartbreak, especially when we found out where he died. You know, it was like all of us were feeling anxious about what was happening in the country in general. To be like, oh man, like now we're a part of this club that no family wants to be a part of. Nobody wants to be a part of a club where their family member dies in police custody. You know, like directly after that, Sandra Bland died in a jail cell in police custody. You know what I mean? So it was this thing that was happening. Yeah, nobody wants to be a part of that club. Because me and him have been talking so much, he'd even posted on my page that with both of our care and empathy for the world, that we could make a change. And so it was heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking. Like it's not okay. It's not okay. And so like I said, like I don't care how long it's been. He didn't deserve it. Our family didn't deserve it. I'm gonna keep speaking about him and telling his story. And I hope that I can connect with other families who have had similar experiences. Cause it's a lot for one family to try to take on. You know, like the heartache, like it's a lot. Sometimes you just want to ignore it because you don't want that heartbreak to come. Hopefully, you know, I can speak with other families and that we can, as a group, hold each other up and support each other and provide resources to each other so that we can find out more information. And so that this doesn't happen to continue to happen to other families. He wasn't the last one. You can look on the Army Times right now and they list all of the people who each year, all the people who have died on that base or surrounding that base. How are we okay with that? These are people who, listen, my family is a military family. These are people who risk their lives every day. We can just throw them away and throw their stories away? No, it's not okay. We sacrifice a lot. Them as individuals sacrifice a lot, and we as families that support them and that are away from them and take care of their kids while they're gone and provide meals. That like my mom used to make meals for the Air Force members that couldn't go home from Japan. My mom used to make meals. They would come and sit with us and break bread with our family. This is not okay that we can't just allow military members to just be disappeared without thorough investigation, without accountability, quite frankly. Because at the end of the day, if nobody's accountable, it's going to continue to happen. And these young kids that are joining, these kids are 18. Like when I was 18 years old, I'm like, all I was thinking about was going to college and partying and like, so these kids, and like my husband immigrated here and joined the military like 5 months after he got here. You know, and he's so proud of his service and so proud of what he done and so proud of the relationships that he built. This is not okay. It's not okay.
You're a really good speaker. I feel like you'd be great working with other families to help get this message across. You have some really powerful, you have a powerful way of articulating thought. So after this happened, when did you start kind of questioning, you know, I know it was immediate because it's such bizarre circumstances, but I mean, in the context of Fort Hood, did you start looking up deaths and you kind of just realized, like, what was that process like?
First of all, they've been having so many deaths because I'm in the military. My family's in the military. I'd already heard about Fort Hood. Right? I don't know any other base by name based off of the deaths that they have. Like Fort Hood stood out already. We just never thought it would be us, right? And that's what you always think. That's why it's so important for people to care, because it could be you next. It could be your child next. It could be your cousin. It could be your uncle. Your father could be next. Your daughter could be next. So we didn't we heard the stories. Another young kid from Michigan. I can't remember if this was before my cousin or after him that died. It's a cycle that just keeps going because nothing's being done about the root of the problem. So yeah, I had already known about Fort Hood. Again, we just didn't think it would be us. And that's what causes a lot of, a lack of feeling like you need to do something about it because you never think it's going to be you until it is.
When you say you had already heard of Fort Hood, like before this happened, what had you heard before about Fort Hood? Like, was this a known thing in the military?
Yeah, it's about, especially about assault, like people reporting harassment, assaults, harassment in general, people being isolated when they started speaking up. That's known. That's known around the military. That is not a secret.
What would they say about Fort Hood? Like, was it kind of a thing where people didn't want to go there because of the reputation?
I think it was more so people, you don't have in the military, you don't have a choice. You go where they send you, right? And again, there's this feeling that you could publicly say something about it, again, because you can get in trouble. You can, just like any other workplace situation where you kind of get isolated from everyone else. No, you especially don't want that in the military, right? And there's a lot of like misogyny in the military, like quite frankly, let's just say it. So a lot of what you heard was about women being harassed and abused. And I don't think that's a secret either, right? Like...
Hearing all of these things and having experienced this violence and heartbreak yourself, what's the most damning thing that you think is happening at Fort Hood that, you know, would be causing some of this? Do you have any theories as to what's going on there that they don't want people to know or talk about?
I won't say that I know anything specific, but I will say a culture of silence, culture of a lack of accountability, a culture of being able to not really have checks and balances, and for people to really put their neck out to handle these known issues. The military is its own culture, like it really is like its own little closed-in society, especially like when you live on base, like you really are your own little community. And so if something's happening so bad that it has gotten outside of that community, you would think someone would want to actually address the problem. So it is either a lack of will, a lack of courage, a lack of wanting to seem like you're involved in what's going on. But at the end of the day, I think that's the root of the problem. They always say a bad apple spoils the bunch. I'm sorry, you don't have that many deaths on a military base because of one or two bad apples, right? It is a culture that you have created and nurtured that you need to dig out from the root. And I just don't think, I'm not sure if anyone feels either they don't feel like they have the power to do it or they just don't have the courage to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect way to describe it, is it's not one or two people. It's a systemic thing that's, I mean, it's really throughout. There's so many military bases that have problems like that, but I don't know why Fort Hood is such a magnet. Like, there's people that call Killeen like Killeen because of all the not only murders, but at Fort Hood you have the two different mass shootings and all of the assaults and like just bizarre events that are not happening anywhere else. I mean, they happen, but not at the same rates or, you know, the fact that they're all in that kind of area. What was everybody thinking at your cousin's funeral when you finally got him back to Michigan? What was that like?
So I was living in DC at the time, and so I didn't even get a chance to make it. Like it happened so fast that I didn't even have a chance to get on a plane to go to his funeral. You know, my aunts went and they recorded it, and obviously it's somber because we're a big family. Like my great grandmother had 12 children. And so, like I said, the people who I call my aunts are actually my second aunt because they're more around my dad's age based off of, you know, the spread of kids and when, you know, those kids started having kids. We are a huge family. And my aunts are amazing women and we show up for each other. And even like my generation, like every time we can get together, like we always get together and support each other. So we are a very tight-knit family. So, you know, my aunts, they went and recorded it. But I mean, it was just somber, but still this feeling of shock. Like it just happened so fast. Nobody was expecting it. We have the pictures of them bringing his body back from the plane. It just didn't feel real. It was surreal. To watch the video, I'm just like, what? It was surreal. Yeah. And, you know, his siblings were kind of spread out. So I just say he has a twin brother. He had a sister that passed away. He has another brother and like a host of, you know, nieces and nephews. So it impacted everybody in a different way, you know, because we all had a certain relationship with him and his kids. And like, you know, it's just, yeah.
And nowadays, what's the family thinking about? Are there some people that think that it was just, you know, a sad, unfortunate death? Are there people that, like you, are wanting to find the truth of the situation? What's it kind of like with everybody?
We always wanted to know what happened, right? Like, I mean, we were all hurting at that time, and again, trying to get information out of the military is, like, it's like we already have to deal with this. Now to try to fight them is a whole other thing. But all of us, like I said, every Memorial Day, we put his picture up and we talk about him and we keep his memory alive with the hopes that one day we would actually, it won't bring him back. Finding out what happened to him won't bring it back. But like I said, if we can do anything to stop this from happening to the next person, that would be our ultimate goal, is to keep his memory alive and then stop another family from going through what we've gone through over the last 9 years.
At the end of the day, have you developed any idea of what you think might be the truth of the situation? Or is it just you don't have enough information to even find any sort of thought?
This is what I think. I think that something so bad was going on at the base that he tried to do something about it. Maybe on this particular day when those charges were brought up of him leaving his post and communicating a threat to a superior officer was him having enough. I don't know if this is true. I was told that I think right after that incident, they had him go to the military hospital. Again, I don't know if that's true. So if that happened and he went to the military hospital, then how did he end up in the jail off base? I do not know. It doesn't make sense to me. He just had a break. Well, he had a mental break all of a sudden for no reason. He had a mental break. No call, no, and then ended up in Bell County Jail. And what? Here's the thing. If he had a mental break, wouldn't he be on watch? Why would he not still be in the hospital? And if he had been taken to a jail and he had a mental break, again, this is just things I've been told. Why wouldn't you be watching him? It does not make sense. It just does not make any sense. So somebody needs to be held accountable.
Well, you need answers and someone to actually tell the truth in this situation. The truth always helps people move on and, find some sort of acceptance in these things. But that's what sucks about even, Fort Hood or whoever you're dealing with. It's like these organizations have so much to lose. And then especially with Fort Hood, they've hidden so many things over the years that it's like, no matter what they say, for me at least, I take everything with a grain of salt, because it's been proven that they've lied about things so many different times, especially even with Vanessa Guillen and in cases like those where it was proven that there were superiors involved in these things that, they obviously don't want to talk about. And it's just crazy.
And it's with the chain of command, it's like things get hidden at each step, right? And then, so just like Vanessa, who do you go to when the person is the next in your chain of command is the one that's doing it to you? Who do you go to then? Because if I go around them, then I'm considered breaking chain of command, right? And especially I'm thinking about her just being young, what 18, 19-year-old has the courage to do that? You're literally drilled for 6 months to learn how to follow a chain of command and how to follow the orders of your superiors, and really to lose yourself. That is what the military, you lose yourself for the greater goal, right? The greater goal is more important than self. So then when something is happening to you, then what do? What, the greater good is to keep the military going, right? But I have to personally make the sacrifice? No.
What would you like to see happen, I guess, to end this interview? What would you like to see happen with your cousin's case? And then what would you like to see happen with Fort Hood in general?
Personally, for our family wants answers about what happened and who was involved. So who were his superiors? What was he communicating to them before this incident in particular that got him arrested or sent him to the hospital? What was going on up until that point? How he ended up off base at an off base jail, and how did he end up dying in that jail cell? And who was there that day? What miscommunications or lack of watching the inmates led him to die, however he died? Who wasn't watching when they were supposed to be watching? That's what we want personally. Overall, what I would like to see is accountability in the military, and not folks not being okay with your military members suffering. They are coming to you of their own free will. Why would you create a culture that drives them out or drives them to depression or drives them to anxiety? Or it's even seen as a place where, in the case of Vanessa Guillen, where people can be and the people who do it can get away with it. People can't commit murders and think it's going to be hidden and that they're going to get. You should even there should be no culture there that people could think that's even possible for them to do. It's such a closed space. We're not talking about from a base that's stretching from east to west, right? You are in one little area. You can't even control the people in that one little area and create a culture that fosters support of each other and saying no tolerance to harassment, no tolerance to misogyny, no tolerance for abuse and violence. If you can't even create that culture in that small space, how do we trust you to go to another country and do that job? How do you feel comfortable sending, especially these young people, when they are under these pressures over somewhere else to do anything? Like, I mean, half of us, when we're dealing with mental health issues or things at our job, half of us can really get out of bed or leave our jobs. You can't do that in the military. You can't just wake up one day and decide, I'm quitting today. So a lot of them feel like they have a choice. So the culture has to change. And so I hope that with talking with other families, we can find a way to demand cultural change within the military. So that's my big goal.
It's a great goal. Yeah, it's just crazy. The entire Fort Hood thing in general. We'll just never know, how many things that they've done or what all they've stayed silent on. Do you feel like through all of this, anyone from Fort Hood or local law enforcement has advocated for your family or tried to help?
Oh, no. Absolutely not. No. Again, all of the support has come from people who served with him and were just as shocked and heartbroken as we are. Again, like, people can literally, if you look up his name, look up his obituary, the comments on his obituary, people who served with him were completely shocked and were like, family, you need to look into this. He like, this is not the type of guy that would go off the rails all of a sudden, and they know more than us because they obviously they worked, in the same environment, but they knew him on a regular basis. And he was there to support people. He was there to lead. He was there to lighten up to low and motivate people. And so how do you go from motivator to dead and supposedly leaving your post or supposedly that's not human nature. That's not how it works.
But everybody, for the most part, that reached out or commented or talked to you guys, they've all said that something is wrong here.
Now, I didn't see a bad word about him. And you know how the internet could be. Anybody, all the people who actually served with him never said a bad word about him. The words that kept coming up, he's a motivator. He would get up in the morning, make sure we had what we needed. He always joked around. He, these are the main things we heard. Obviously, we know that, but to hear the other people that have served with him from Afghanistan to Germany, around the U.S., they all say the same thing. They all say the same thing about him. So he was true to his character, especially, I think especially as he got older, like, he's just true to his character and really just wanted to serve the country. And so for his service to end that way, it's infuriating, quite frankly.
Well, is there anything else you want to say before we end the interview? I think we covered all the bases.
Just that I am willing to talk to other families. I'm willing to, people hear this and they knew him. I would love to talk to you. Again, it's farther enough out that it doesn't feel like a cloud hanging over me. Like, at this point, it is just showing him honor and, speaking his name and making sure that people know who he is. But I would love to talk to you. So if folks want to reach out to me, I can, provide some information so that I can connect with other families or people who know him.
Yeah, if anybody's watching, they could reach out to me.
Yeah.
I have a public email that people can send information to, so then I can pass it on to you. Well, thank you so much for sharing the story. I mean, it's very powerful stuff, and
thank you for even putting it out there, because like I said, I didn't know anybody else who even was taking this on, and so I'm thankful that we just happened to be listening to the episode, and I'm like, I want to contact them. So thank you.
it's weird little things in life that lead one person to this thing, and you listen to the show and then you contact me, and here we are talking on the day that he passed away. So it's all these synchronicities, and hopefully we can affect some sort of a change by getting people to at least question what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause that's the biggest thing. It isn't, proving that there's this grand conspiracy around Fort Hood and there's this and it's more like just getting people to kind of snap out of it and say, yeah, none of this really makes sense and there's something wrong here. I mean, even just as, to me, what pisses me off is like all this assault and allegations and just specifically at Fort Hood that go unreported or unpunished. People don't face any real consequences for those things. And that also, 9 times out of 10 leads to some form of violence, whether it's, physical abuse or murder too, obviously.
And you can always do something about individual behavior, but what you can do is say it's not tolerated. You can create a culture where it's not tolerated. And so people who want to partake in that behavior will be shown the door or not join at all because they know they can't get away with it. So until we create that type of culture, things like this will continue to happen.
Absolutely crazy right there, that entire interview. And it's so cut and dry, obvious that there's something wrong there. I mean, here you have a soldier in the middle of these years where all these other soldiers kept dying bizarre deaths that were unexplainable. And he's posting on his Facebook account that there's stuff wrong that he's seen, and are you going to stand up to this with me? And, writing all these cryptic things. And then he randomly disappears from base. He's arrested and put into a county jail nearby. And then he dies almost immediately in police custody. None of that makes any sense. And I'm going to be starting a petition to be sent to Fort Hood leadership, local authorities in Killeen, asking for investigations to be opened up for these families. That case is going to be included in there, so please go sign the petition. And by signing that petition, which is going to be linked in the description and in a pinned comment, you can help us try to effect some sort of a change here. But now we have to get to 2017. On July 11th, 2017, 22-year-old specialist Justin Glenn Ogden was found unresponsive inside his on-post residence. According to Fort Hood officials, Justin's death was ruled a self-unaliving as he had apparently died from a and he left a self-unaliving note near his body. But when his family read the note, they were adamant that Justin didn't write it. His mother, Toni Ogden, stated that the handwriting on the note did not in any way match her son's. She further said, none of it ever added up. He put his truck in the shop that morning to have a lift kit added. Also, his time of death was around 11 a.m. He was supposed to be at work and had been there that morning, but he wasn't found until 6 p.m. when his girlfriend got home. All I ever got from anyone at Fort Hood were lies and useless condolences. Something really bad is going on at that base, and it needs to be stopped. I have prayed every day since I put my son in the ground that they would be held accountable for the horrific way they are failing our children. No soldier left behind. As of today, there have been no updates in the case of Justin's death. However, the circumstances surrounding his death remain incredibly controversial. Many have questioned Fort Hood's response to the significant number of soldier deaths over the years, with many theorizing that the base had failed to properly investigate alleged self-unalivings. In so many of these cases, when you take a step back and look at these situations, they look so much more like a murder, especially with all this evidence that's missed, than a self-deletion. The next tragic case involves specialist Zachary Charles Moore. Zachary enlisted in the Army in 2014, and by 2016, he was living at Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas. However, after a few short months, Zachary's mental health took a turn for the worse. He started to suffer from extreme anxiety and depression, and he reported this to his chain of command, but nothing was done. Nobody seemed to care about him. And by October of that year, Zachary had disappeared from Fort Hood. Sadly, just like other soldiers that we've talked about here, Fort Hood officials put no effort into looking for Zachary. They didn't file any missing persons report, and they simply listed him as AWOL, but his mother knew that something was wrong immediately. Shortly after learning that Zachary was missing, she flew in from Florida and went to the Killeen Police Department to help find her son. Eventually, they were able to track his phone to a remote location in town, and luckily, they found him alive. But Zachary was in a bad place. He told his mother that he was struggling and that he wanted to do something to himself. So from there, he was quickly hospitalized and put on medication. And over the next few months, things seemed to have gotten better for him. And by May of 2017, he learned that Fort Hood was sending him out to South Korea. His chain of command even issued Zachary a mental health waiver to be deployed, which basically stated that although his issues disqualified him from deployment, they did not believe that they were significant enough to prevent him from leaving. But this was pretty concerning for his loved ones. To them, Zachary didn't seem stable enough for deployment, but clearly the Army believed otherwise. So with that, he left for South Korea, and sadly, on August 1st, 2017, Zachary was having another mental health crisis, this time overseas, far from friends and family. Now, because South Korea doesn't have a 911 hotline, Zachary called his commander for help, but the commander wouldn't respond for 2 whole hours, and by the time he did respond, it was too late. Later that day, Specialist Zachary Charles Moore was found unresponsive in his barracks in South Korea. He was still clinging onto life and was quickly brought to the ICU, but the following day he would succumb to his injuries. His death was ruled a self-deletion. His mom would later say, "I've had a hole in my heart since then. When you have to bury your child, nothing in life will prepare you for that." Zachary's family would later learn that his death could have been preventable if Fort Hood had better leadership. Questions that haunted them were, why did it take 2 hours for someone to respond to a soldier's cry for help? Did anyone try to administer aid when they found him unresponsive? They also learned that his medication had been changed shortly before he left for South Korea, and that can obviously cause someone to want to self-delete. It also came out that Zachary had been having issues with his superiors. Fellow soldiers said that they would harass him and single him out during training exercises. In the end, Zachary's family was disappointed in the fact that he had been deployed at all, since he had just recently had a massive mental health episode that required hospitalization. Clearly, he wasn't in the right headspace for deployment, and they denied him the opportunity to visit his family before he was shipped off to South Korea. Now, obviously, this wasn't a suspicious self-deletion, but it is yet another example of how Fort Hood's chain of command did not and does not always prioritize the soldiers' well-being. They seemingly don't care, they like to ignore warning signs, and for some reason, this is another report, we've covered a number of these already, where the superiors are really harassing the people underneath them in the chain of command. And I know that people are going to say, oh, that's a military thing. You gotta, be strong to be in the military and yada, yada, yada. If those practices and behaving like that is leading to time after time, these soldiers choosing to end their existences because of the treatment that they're receiving, that's not constructive. That's deeply harmful. Over the course of the next few years, several other tragedies would take place at Fort Hood, including the deaths of Army Sergeant Kelton Svaler and Army veteran Scott Weinhold. The two were reported missing after going out on nearby Belton Lake near Fort Hood, and ultimately, both men were found days later drowned after their motorized canoes flipped in rough water. Both Kelton and Scott's deaths were ruled as accidental, and in addition to these deaths, Fort Hood has also reported numerous motorcycle accidents, automobile accidents, boating accidents, training accidents, and even accidental gunshot wound deaths. For example, there's the story of Specialist Shelby Jones, who died off base while enlisted and serving at Fort Hood. Shockingly though, the murder of Specialist Shelby Jones isn't the only unsolved homicide connected to Fort Hood. There are also the murders of Private Justin Lewis, Army veteran Cleveland Lewis, and so many more mysterious deaths with no information, and of course, dozens of self-deletions. Both Justin Lewis and Cleveland Lewis were found shot to death off post in Killeen. From 2016 to 2020, there were a reported 159 deaths at Fort Hood not related to combat. Military Justice for All stated, quote, "In the last 4 years, from January 2016 to present, Fort Hood on average lost 36 soldiers a year. If you divide 36 by 12 months, That's an average of 3 soldiers dead every month. We must find out why so we can prevent these untimely deaths and save the precious lives and futures of these mostly young soldiers. The average age at time of death is 28 years old, and each death has a ripple effect on the families, friends, and communities left behind. Think about that. Let's take a factory, however many people it employs, but if you say 3 people a month are dying at this specific factory, you'd think that there would be some sort of a large investigation launched into why are 3 people a month dying at this factory and not at these other factories? Why is this factory killing people and these other factories, they have accidents, but not nearly at the same rate as this one specific factory? And when people think about the danger of serving in the military, it conjures images of foreign lands and combat zones, perhaps being exposed to toxic chemicals or unsafe conditions in other foreign parts of the world. It's rare to think that there might be a risk inside the safe confines of a military base in the United States. At least, that was the reality for Patty Troyan, whose son, 21-year-old Private First Class Logan Costello, was stationed at Fort Hood in 2019. However, after being stationed at Fort Hood for only 5 months, on November 20th, 2019, Logan was found dead inside of his closet on base after he self-deleted himself with a dog leash. Patty admitted his front door was bolted from the inside. He over the closet door and shut himself in the closet and sat down. According to Reform Austin, Logan had reported self-deletion ideation to his command, and they responded by visiting him in the barracks and confiscating his personal firearm. Prescriptions found later in his room indicated that he had been treated for anxiety and depression. He also spoke with a psychiatrist. However, Fort Hood refused to release any of the medical records to his own blood family. Born in Ohio, Logan Costello had proved himself in high school as class president and captain of the football team. After a few months in college, he decided to join the military and he was sent to Fort Hood. At first, Logan was optimistic about his career choice, but after being stationed at Fort Hood for a short time, something broke him. His wife, Kayla, stated, "Demons took over my husband's head, and as sad as it is, no one has an answer for it or ever will." She later admitted that the night before they walked their dogs to the lake and spoke about how perfect everything was and how happy they were. She never had any idea that he had the capability to self-delete. She added, "I definitely believe Fort Hood could have done more for him. If you're a healthcare professional and your patient tells you they are having thoughts, you don't just pat them on the back and send them off for the day. The base cares more about its equipment than its soldiers." Logan's mother, Patty, demanded Fort Hood release his medical records, autopsy report, and complete investigation to her, but they simply told her, "Contact the Killeen Police Department." According to Media Relations Chief for Fort Hood, Christopher Hogg, "We don't have access to them." It's a direct quote. He further stated that there was never an autopsy conducted by the Bell County Justice of the Peace, but Patty didn't believe them and said that the Army told her an autopsy was conducted, and that was one of the reasons why there was a delay in getting Logan's body shipped back to Ohio. For Patty and the rest of Logan's loved ones, Fort Hood needed to focus on how they responded to mental health concerns and remove the stigma surrounding it. She said, "I don't know what happened at Fort Hood. Something happened, and I'm determined they're going to tell me what happened because he was fine when he left my home. And 5 months after being at Fort Hood, he was dead." On August 19th, 2019, 23-year-old Private Gregory Morales got into his black Kia Rio, left Fort Hood, and was never seen again. Unfortunately, Gregory disappeared just a few weeks before he was scheduled to be discharged from the Army. When he failed to return to his post as a motor transport operator, Fort Hood once again immediately labeled him as a deserter and classified his status as AWOL. Born in Oklahoma, Gregory was described as kind, loving, funny, and a person who loved to have fun. For Gregory, family was everything, and at the age of 21, he had married a woman named Penny Morales. Gregory had been a frequent customer at the strip club in town called the Dollhouse, and that's where he met Penny, who was a dancer. Gregory opted to take Penny's last name and loved her 2 daughters like they were his own. By all accounts, Gregory had a passion for life and was excited for his future outside the Army. However, after a few years at Fort Hood, Gregory had started looking for a life outside of his Army connections. He joined car and outlaw motorcycle clubs. His mother, Kimberly, said that the last time she spoke with him was on the afternoon of August 19th when he called her asking for gas money. That evening, Gregory had planned on going to a club with a few of his friends. Unfortunately, after spending the evening out with his friends, Gregory vanished. Once again, I think you're seeing a pattern here. Fort Hood, after hearing that Gregory was missing, did not search for him, and there was no investigation. When Kimberly, Gregory's mother, called to find out what had happened to her son, they told her he was a grown man who had abandoned his post, and there was no proof that something bad had happened to him. Kimberly, though, knew in her heart that Gregory would never leave without telling her what was going on, and as the months continued without word from her son, Kimberly's pleas to Fort Hood were ignored. Fort Hood and the military failed Gregory, and without their help, Kimberly decided to turn to social media. On her Facebook account, she wrote, "It has been 10 days, and there are still no leads on my son. If anyone has info, no matter how trivial it may seem, please message me. If he owes someone money, I'll find a way to pay it. If he's in hiding or has just run away, please just let me know he's alive. I haven't slept since this happened. Please help. Be anonymous if you need to be, but please help find my son. He's 23, about 5'11", brown hair and eyes. Update, still no credible info. Please keep sharing until he's found. Now 14 days and still nothing. Update, 9/25/19. It's been over 30 days. Someone has to know something. Please let the police know anonymously. If you must, PM me, and I'll tell them where to find him. Please come forward with anything you may know." Kimberly was left in the dark when it came to any news regarding her son. When they found his abandoned 2018 black Kia Rio in January 2020, Fort Hood did not inform her. In May, 9 months after his disappearance, Gregory's sister-in-law tracked his vehicle through Carfax and discovered it had been sold at an auction in Dallas, Texas. Kimberly stated, "You don't think that would be something to tell us? Why keep that a secret? That was the first time that they even came close to admitting they might have screwed up, and maybe something did happen to him since they recovered the car and he wasn't with it." Kimberly had even called Fort Hood several times to suggest that a reward be offered for any information on his whereabouts, but once again, her pleas fell on deaf ears. So Gregory was missing. But then in April of 2020, one of the most infamous events to ever rock the Fort Hood campus occurred when a woman named Vanessa Guillen went missing. Now, I've already covered Vanessa's case with Courtney and I's podcast, Murder in America. We did a whole episode about her story because there's so much information there. But just to summarize here for posterity in this episode, Vanessa Guillen, born on September 30th, 1999 in Houston, Texas, was a 20-year-old U.S. Army specialist and small arms/artillery repairer stationed at Fort Hood. Vanessa had joined the Army in 2018, and her family said that she was extremely passionate and excited about the opportunity. However, on April 22nd, 2020, Vanessa went missing from Fort Hood, triggering a massive search effort that involved the Army, Texas Rangers, FBI, and Bell County Sheriff's Office. Her family, particularly her sister Mayra, expressed distrust in the Army's response and alleged that before her death, Vanessa had told her that she had been assaulted by a sergeant, her superior in the Army, which had made her feel incredibly unsafe. Now, it's a known fact now that Vanessa had in fact told people that she had been assaulted by people in the Army before her death. She was kind of making it pretty well known that there were people superiors of hers that were victimizing not only possibly her, but possibly even more women at Fort Hood. But what's insane here is that initially, the Army claimed that there was no evidence that Vanessa had been assaulted. They were basically calling her a liar when she was missing, and eventually when she was found murdered. This, though, drew outrage from celebrities, people online, her family members, when the Army stated that there was no evidence that she had been assaulted, even though she had told everybody that she had been. It was a deeply disturbing twist, and you could see right there a blatant attempt to cover something up.
The family of a soldier who vanished from Fort Hood in Texas is demanding answers. 20-year-old Private First Class Vanessa Guillen was last seen in April. The Army's Criminal Investigation Command is looking into her disappearance. Army investigators say they suspect foul play. In recent weeks, protesters have gathered at Fort Hood and in Guillen's hometown of Killeen to rally behind her family.
The family feels Fort Hood officials are not doing enough to find Vanessa Guillen.
They're not here to help us find Vanessa. They're here to hoard that information because they don't want us to know what's happened.
You believe that the base is withholding information from the Guillen family?
They're covering up for each other.
Guillen's family believes someone Vanessa knew is responsible.
Well, we understand that she was harassed by a couple of her superiors at 2 different occasions that she reported to her family and her friends and her colleagues at work.
Fort Hood has launched an investigation into the allegations that Guillen was harassed. So far, Army investigators say they have no credible reports. Since Guillen went missing, volunteers in the FBI are assisting Army investigators. Army investigators say they are doing everything in their power to find her. They have scoured fields and a river near the base.
We won't stop this effort until we're successful. And with your help, we can be successful sooner.
Their own people are investigating their own people, basically. And that creates an inherent conflict of interest. And the Army cannot give any answers to the family 30 days after her disappearance. And we decided we need to start putting pressure to find out what happened to Vanessa.
If she comes up dead, close this base, she said. Guillen is the second soldier to go missing at Fort Hood in recent months. Gregory Morales disappeared last August.
There's eyes and ears everywhere on a base. So whatever is going on in that base needs to be investigated. We need to find out because nobody is safe on that base. Nobody's safe right now in the military.
Oh, Maria, that story is so disturbing. I hope it won't take long for the family to get answers.
On June 30th, 2020, partial human remains were found near the Leon River in Bell County, Texas, and were identified later on as Guillen's on July 6, 2020. She had been bludgeoned to death by a hammer on base at Fort Hood by Specialist Aaron David Robinson, a fellow soldier. Robinson had apparently been motivated by fear to murder Vanessa after she had seen a photo of his girlfriend, Cecily Ann Aguilar, on his phone, which violated Army fraternization rules. And apparently, he then killed her to cover up his harassment. With Cecily Ann Aguilar's assistance, Robinson dismembered, burned, and buried Vanessa Guillen's remains in 3 separate shallow graves.
Shame on them for not coming to a press conference and saying, mea culpa, we apologize, we screwed up.
What happened to Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen at Fort Hood is no longer in doubt. What her family and their attorney, Natalie Kawam, still want to know is why.
What was the motive? Why do you believe Vanessa was killed?
He told his girlfriend that she was going to report him for having an affair with a married person.
He is Army Specialist Aaron Robinson, who was dating a former soldier's wife. Her name is Cecily Aguilar, and she's now in custody. In a 5-page affidavit, Aguilar confesses to helping him get rid of Guillen's body, telling investigators Guillen never made it off the Army base alive.
You can't tell me that someone's bludgeoned to death in an armory room, and then all of a sudden, nobody heard her screaming, nobody saw the blood all over the room.
According to the affidavit, Robinson beat Guillen to death with a hammer, put her in a storage case, went home, and came back to base that night to move the body. The girlfriend says he took her out to a bridge near the Leon River, where the couple cut her up, set her on fire, and buried her in 3 separate places. From the beginning, Guillen's family has claimed she was harassed.
There is no credible information or reports that Specialist Robinson harassed Specialist Guillen.
But according to the attorney, Guillen's family isn't buying it.
You were the same people that told us harassment's not criminal. And guess what? You have a dead person.
And on July 1st, 2020, after the authorities found out who had killed Vanessa, when the police finally caught up to him on the street when he was walking, he pulled out a weapon ultimately and self-deleted himself on the spot. Cecily Ann Aguilar was then arrested on July 2nd, 2020, the day after Robinson had self-deleted on the street, and she pled guilty to 1 count of accessory to murder after the fact and 3 counts of making false statements, receiving a 30-year sentence on August 14th, 2023. And this case was all over the news. I was living in Austin, Texas at the time, and I remember there was a huge mural of Vanessa Guillen on a local business. Everybody here in Texas was talking about this because she had gone missing in April. Nobody knew where she was. Nobody had any idea. This was a huge story. It was pretty apparent that the Army was trying to cover things up. They weren't being fully transparent or honest. Honestly, you should listen to the podcast if you want to hear more about Vanessa's story. We did it on our show, Murder in America. We went into extreme detail with this case. And this is like a microcosm of everything that's wrong with Fort Hood.
As you know, there has been a lot of updates since we last spoke. We believe that her remains were found. We believe that the suspect had, and that unfortunately doesn't provide us much information about how this happened, why a beautiful young soldier is not with us today. They should be ashamed of themselves. Protocol was breached in every manner. We lost one of our own on our own base. Unacceptable, should never happen ever. Not just once, one person too many is what happened here. I have Vanessa Guillen's family here, her father, her sisters. Congressman Tulsi Gabbard was kind enough to come in and meet the family and give her support. Like we said before, we demand a congressional investigation. This should never have happened. And we will never know what happened ever until we get a congressional investigation, because everything we were given was lies. It was evasive. They were not sincere. They were actually very disingenuous to us. I don't know who's covering up for who, but it doesn't matter. We lost a life. We lost a beautiful young soldier. And it's time we fix our system. Women should not be afraid to come forth about harassment. They should not fear reporting harassment. This is unacceptable. It's 2020. What's happening? Harassment's not criminal. That was what we were told. Well, guess what? We have a dead person because of harassment. It is criminal. We want legislation. We need legislation so this never happens again. There was a strong young woman who died. She was strong. She ran. She played soccer. She was going for a hike that day. If she can get killed, who couldn't get killed? This could happen to any of our mothers, our sisters, our daughters. Enough is enough. One person too many. Women do not, and men do not feel safe reporting harassment in the military. You go to the webpage of I Am Vanessa Guillen, and you will see hundreds and hundreds of soldier stories that are so disheartening. That all these women face this kind of harassment and couldn't say anything. Harassment and assault, because harassment leads to assault. Just because someone doesn't want to talk about it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And today we're here to demand a congressional investigation into how the protocol was breached.
The attempted cover-up of assault and harassment, protecting the superiors, a brotherhood almost of people that don't want to break their ranks and tell the truth. They want to keep these kind of secrets amongst themselves to avoid other people getting in trouble. And then, of course, there's the fact that Vanessa was killed by somebody, and then he before he could be brought in for questioning, and that man's girlfriend helped him dismember, burn the body, bury the body. She lied to police. It was an entire sloppy, huge, messy incident. But with the cover-up of these harassment claims that Vanessa Guillen had made, this just paints a dark picture of the faculty and the people at Fort Hood that are really in power. In 2019, Vanessa, after being in the Army for about a year, she made a report on base to superiors and what she believed were the proper authorities that one of her superiors had harassed her. That was actually written down in a report. It was documented. The Army tried to claim initially after Vanessa went missing that that had never happened, even though it was written down and proven that it did happen, but no investigation was ever conducted into this claim. Vanessa had told people at Fort Hood and made an official report saying that she had been harassed by someone with more power than her, and they had not investigated it at all. They basically just wrote it down. Oh, that's terrible. Put it in a drawer and then shelved the entire thing and never revisited it. And it wasn't just once. Vanessa actually reported this twice. She even said that at one point her superior had harassed her, asked her if she wanted to participate in a threesome, and that's just what's written down in the reports. Vanessa's own family claims that she was assaulted on base before her death. They claim this still is a huge cover-up to this day, and there's a lot of things that have gone missing and weird holes in the official stories. Autopsy reports that are sealed, but still to this day, even though the Army admitted years later that Vanessa had been harassed, they still claim that there's no evidence that she was assaulted, even though according to her own family and her best friends, she had told all of them that that had actually happened. So is this a cover-up? I believe so. And was Vanessa killed to keep her quiet about people that she could have implicated? I don't know. I mean, the whole story is just very suspicious and strange. And I feel like there are definitely pieces of the puzzle that are still missing, that her family are still fighting for to this day. But back to Gregory. Remember, his family was looking for him. The Army did not tell his family that they had found his car, even though he'd been missing for months at that point. And in April of 2020, when Vanessa first went missing, Gregory's case also gained attention. Gregory's family would later say that the widespread media attention towards Vanessa, though, was kind of sad, because their son, Gregory, never received that sort of attention. When a reward was offered for information on Vanessa's whereabouts, Kimberly, Gregory's mother, was shocked. She admitted, "It sounds very selfish, but they immediately put out a reward for information for her. In September, they told me they were working on a reward for Greg, And so when hers popped up that fast, I said, hey, come on, what's the deal? But finally, on April 30th, 2020, after the reward was put up for Vanessa, a $15,000 reward was finally offered for any information regarding Gregory's whereabouts, an amount that would eventually increase to $25,000. A few weeks later, on June 19th, investigators received an anonymous tip regarding the Vanessa Guillen case, and they were sent out to a remote field near the 3200 block of Florence Road in Killeen. And shockingly, when investigators were looking for the remains of Vanessa Guillen, they discovered the skeletal remains of Gregory Morales. His body had started to sink into the dirt due to how long it had been in the field, and it was lightly covered by dust and debris. When Kimberly found out, investigators told her that they believed he had been shot in the face, although no cause of death has ever been released.
During the search for Houston soldier Vanessa Guillen, the remains of another soldier were found near Fort Hood. We're talking about Gregory Morales.
Do you feel like your son's case was forgotten?
Very much so. Vanessa's family and all of the publicity that they've gotten certainly helped find Greg, and every time I get a chance, I want to tell them thank you. I honestly don't know how her family was able to listen to the details about her death.
He was last seen off base, driving a 2018 Kia Rio.
He texted me wanting some gas money for the car he had bought, and I was teasing him about how he could afford a new car but no gas to put in it. He said that he was saving up the money to get a divorce and that everything would be okay. He just needed to work through the issues with her.
What is your message to Fort Hood?
Transparency doesn't mean that you have to tell me all the details and everything that you know. It can simply mean we have some leads and we're looking into them. That's all I want to know, is that they're trying.
We actually visited the place where Gregory's body was found. Take a look. It was in this field here in Killeen, Texas, where Private Gregory Morales' body was discovered. But it wasn't necessarily even his body that was found. It was more like his skeletal remains. Now, as we've talked about already, Gregory's body was discovered here while they were searching for the body of Vanessa Guillen. When looking for one murder victim, they actually uncovered the body of another. And once again, to this day, like every other person that we're covering in the story, Gregory's murder remains unsolved. It's hard to imagine. And to put this into perspective, pretty much between every single location that we visited in this video, it's been about a 5 to 10 minute drive. So it's not like this guy's body's found here and then 45 minutes away there's another corpse found, and then an hour there's another. These people are being discovered in very close proximity. Like I said earlier in the video, people here in Killeen have complained that this town reeks of death, from the mass shootings and the violent incidents to all these unexplained murders and deaths, unsolved crimes. It's genuinely hard to believe that this sort of violence can plague a community like Killeen, but it has. But we've come back here, and right now we've got those same devices, the Epic box, which is a yes or no device, and the Spirit box. And we're gonna try ask a couple questions and see if we can get any responses as to what happened to Gregory. Now, I want to remind everybody online that throughout this video, we're not trying to necessarily directly contact the spirits of these people. We're more so asking from a curious perspective to see if any energy in the area, anybody, anything can respond to try help solve these cold cases. Because at this point, authorities have stopped trying. People at Fort Hood never cared in the first place, so we're really out here trying to make sure that these cases stay active. Look at that hawk up there. Also, our microphone holder broke last night, if you guys have been wondering why we are filming without a microphone stand.
I'm the cameraman and a boom mic guy now.
Yeah. 2-for-1 deal. All right, we're just here right now trying to figure out what happened to Gregory Morales. Does anybody here remember when they found those skeletal remains in this area 5 years ago?
Yes, they are.
Is there anybody here with us? Can you say hello or hi? Fort.
Do you remember someone's body being dumped out here?
Please, sir. I saw. So
How many people was it? 5.
Do you know the guy's name whose body was found out here? Do you know his name?
No. Did you watch him get killed? Why did Gregory end up out here? Can you tell us why he ended up in this area? Okay, so can you at least just tell us why he was killed? Why was Gregory killed? Don't tell them. Yeah. Juno, don't tell them or something. You can tell us, why did they kill Gregory? They liked it. They liked it. Did they just kill him just to kill him? Are they all connected? All of these murders? News is on. Can you just give us a clue as to what the motive was? Did you see who came out here and buried his body? Bury me. Gregory? In Killeen. Can you tell us what they looked like, the people who came out here to bury that body? Fields around this place. Are there more bodies buried in Killeen that people don't know of? Don't act excited. Were these people killed to keep them quiet? I really wonder, and a lot of people wonder, why this place was chosen to bury Gregory's body. Why did they put him here in this ground? I mean, it worked. Yeah. I mean, it looks like people already dumping trash out here. It's so weird though, because he now don't quote me, but I believe that he had no connection to this area. Like, it's not like he lived nearby or anything. It's such a random place to come just bury somebody. Articles? Don't they do like articles like as a punishment? Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about Gregory or what happened to him?
He's a dead man. High quality.
Look what happened here. We just decked him. Scream? I'm sorry. Was there a woman killed as well?
You can fuck. Can you face them?
We'll have to go back and check out those responses later on. It's kind of like, you know, when we're filming these videos, we're in kind of like off-limits places. I don't know what this area is. There's no trespassing signs, but it's...
We are trespassing.
Yeah, you know, you just don't want to be out here too long. But Gregory, we're so sorry, man, about what happened to you. And we're trying to keep your name alive. It's just so damn weird, man. Thinking like in the middle of this residential neighborhood, the most normal of places, like decent houses too.
No, this is what's happening.
Yeah, corpses are showing up in Killeen. All right.
So, it was crazy being there. And actually, when you read all these stories and you think about them, I feel like your mind pictures certain circumstances and the locations in certain ways. But being there, I mean, it's crazy. That little field, that patch of grass is like in the middle of neighborhoods, so close to houses, surrounded by people and eyes. And yet his body was discovered there and he had been murdered and nobody had seen or heard anything. Was it possible that Gregory's death could be linked to one of the outlaw motorcycle gangs he associated with? Well, for some, the idea of that wasn't too far-fetched. You see, in 2017, Staff Sergeant Anthony Lavelle's dead body was discovered in a creek in the Rancier area of Killeen. And apparently, according to reports, Anthony's eyeballs were missing. They had been scooped out of his head, and his face had been split completely in half. His corpse was decimated. This was an extremely gruesome and bloody scene, and he had been mutilated. It looked like he had been attacked almost by an animal when authorities found Anthony's body. The Killeen police, though, ruled Anthony's death as an accidental death. They said that he had somehow gotten into a motor accident, had flown off of a bridge, had died completely accidentally, but they never explained the missing eyeballs. They never explained the egregious injuries all across his body that did not make sense with the accident that they alleged that he had been involved in. And interestingly enough, a rival motorcycle gang's vest was found hanging on a tree right in the area where Anthony's body was found. Really, really strange, right? Anthony's associated with the motorcycle gang. His rival motorcycle gang's vest was hanging in a tree near where Anthony's body was discovered. His body is found completely mutilated, and yet it's once again ruled an accident. We actually visited the area where Anthony's body was discovered. Let's cut to that now.
You want to go down there?
So it was in this area in 2017 where another body related to Fort Hood was discovered. This time it was a young man by the name of Anthony Lavelle. Now, Anthony was, like I said before, a service member from Fort Hood, and he was discovered down in this area in this specific portion of this creek with his eyes gouged out and a gigantic gash in his head. It actually, I've heard it described as his head was almost split open. What's interesting though is it was labeled an accident by the police department here in Killeen, by Fort Hood authorities and officials, and it was never investigated as a homicide, even though Allegedly, there was a patch in a motorcycle jacket from apparently a rival motorcycle gang to the group that Anthony was involved with. There were a lot of different circumstantial signs that showed that Anthony may have been murdered here. But yeah, it was deemed an accident and it was quickly forgotten. We're gonna do a little bit of spirit boxing here and we're just gonna see if we can get anything. Now, it is interesting because there's a ton of clothing and a ton of trash around here. I believe that people live in this area. So while we investigate for the paranormal, we use a lot of different methods. One of the things that's a mainstay here in the paranormal that we believe in is the spirit box. So this thing scans through radio frequencies at a rapid rate. People believe that by doing this, you can hear the voices of these spirits or energies because they might be speaking on another wavelength or frequency that we can't hear with our own ears. And we also have an epic box, which is an EMF stimuli that will give you a yes or a no answer based on EMF fluctuations. If you can hear me, my name is Colin.
My name's Connor.
If you're here with us or you can hear us, can you say yes or hi or hello?
What's going on?
Me. I heard killed me. They killed me again. Report's wrong. Felon. Yeah, I heard. I was sitting. Was it a biker gang? That wind all of a sudden. Because the authorities tried to say that this was an accident. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah.
I saw it. You're gonna die today.
It was mysterious. They took the rings off.
Was it a biker gang or was it someone else?
Almost there.
But Anthony was killed by somebody? This wasn't an accident?
Caught?
His mallet.
Did someone gouge his eyes out? I heard a credible person.
So yes, he was killed. So yes, he was killed.
Yeah, it's about time.
I want to get out of here. This is kind of a sketchy area, and we're just like standing out in the broad daylight with cameras. But it's bizarre. It's really strange to imagine Anthony actually. I believe the theory is that they're saying that he crashed his bike off of the bridge over there. But when you crash your bike, your eyes don't pop out. And there aren't, you know, rival motorcycle gang cuts hanging in the area and all these other weird extenuating circumstances. But it's weird. It's like, was he killed by someone at Fort Hood? Was he working on one of these secret programs at Fort Hood and he was taken out? Even with the motorcycle gang angle, it makes you wonder, was it actually a motorcycle gang if it was, or is that just what they would want someone to believe? Because then it's really obvious placing a cut by a guy's body to try and put the blame on somebody or some group. Maybe it's, I don't know, we're not making any allegations here, but it's eerie to think about just a dead body. And then to see all this stuff, like people are living down here in this area.
And they were when it happened.
Yeah. I wonder if someone saw something and just never said anything about it.
Well, I don't know if I'd say anything if I saw a military truck pull up and dump a body on the side of the river.
Yeah, me either. All right, let's get out of here. Eerie, at the site of Anthony's corpse discovery, there is a shredded license plate nailed to the tree from Texas. And, you know, according to them, it was a motorcycle accident.
Crazy stuff there. Hard to believe. Just so dark when you're standing in these locations, trying to find the truth in whatever way that you can. And just haunting to think that these things happened here. I mean, it's like, for this video, we visited a number of different locations, but they're all pretty close together in the city of Killeen. It's a pretty small town. And to think that there have just been bodies found all over this community. And not only just the random murders that happen in a city, but these are all people linked to Fort Hood. Anthony Lavelle, he was a staff sergeant stationed at Fort Hood. Gregory Morales was stationed at Fort Hood. So is there a rogue motorcycle gang that killed Gregory and killed Anthony? We don't know. That's something that, you know, to this day, we don't know. And I don't know if we're even going to know in the future because nobody's investigating these deaths as murders. They're just tragic accidents. In Gregory's case, I believe they are investigating it as a murder, but no one to this day has been fingered as a possible killer. And if Vanessa Guillen had never been reported missing, chances are that Gregory's body would have never been found. Gregory's younger brother, Nick, stated they didn't do any real searching until they got a lead. If an M16 goes missing, they shut down an entire unit to find it. Why don't they do that for people? Think about that. If a gun goes missing at Fort Hood, they shut down the entire unit. It's a huge concerted effort to find that missing gun or piece of equipment. But when a human being that's put their life on the line and decided to sign away their life and their time to their military, to their country, when one of those people disappears off the face of the earth, Fort Hood officials don't bat an eye. It seems like they really just don't care and they want people to forget about these cases as soon as they happen. According to Fort Hood Lieutenant Colonel Emmanuel Ortiz, the Army doesn't search for soldiers classified as AWOL. In fact, Kimberly, Gregory's mother, was also told that Gregory would not be buried with honors or given a grave in a national cemetery unless his autopsy found that he was deceased before being labeled as a deserter. What a slap in the face. Fort Hood also refused to pay for his body to be shipped back to Oklahoma, and Kimberly was forced to create a GoFundMe account for financial support in the wake of her son's murder. In July 2020, the Weddle family's hard work paid off, and Fort Hood Colonel Patrick Disney reinstated Gregory's status back to active duty, quote, based on information from the Killeen Police Department, end quote, and he was finally able to be buried with military honors. Although it wasn't the outcome she had hoped for, Kimberly said, he was always very proud to serve in the military. That was always his dream. Gregory's case, however, only further highlighted Fort Hood's mishandling of missing persons cases. They refused, all the way up until the time when Gregory's body was found, to believe that foul play could have been involved. They ignored Kimberly's requests for answers and investigations, and there was simply zero urgency in this entire thing to investigate his disappearance. And to this very day, there are still no answers as to what happened to Gregory. No suspects have been identified or charged, and there's still no official cause of death. Now, for whatever reason, the year 2020 was an extremely dark year for Fort Hood, starting with the death of 21-year-old specialist Shelby Tyler Jones. On Sunday, March 1st, around 3:05 a.m., Jones was discovered on the ground of the Mickey's convenience store at 3200 South Fort Hood Street, suffering from a single gunshot wound. Medical personnel arrived at the scene where they performed life-saving measures, but unfortunately, Shelby passed away after he bled out around 3:45 a.m. He was pronounced dead by Justice of the Peace Daryl Peters, and it was later reported that he had been shot at a strip club named Club Dreams, located at 4300 South Fort Hood Street, and there was no information as to how or why he ended up in the convenience store parking lot. Born in Gina, Louisiana, Shelby Jones had been at Fort Hood since August of 2018. He was deployed to Iraq from May 2018 to January 2019, and he was a well-respected and valued member of the Brave Rifles team. Colonel Ralph Overland would later say, "Specialist Shelby Jones was a highly valued member of the Brave Rifles team, and his loss is profoundly felt by all his friends and fellow troopers. He was a dedicated professional who truly loved his family and the Army. Our heartfelt condolences go out to the family, friends, and loved ones of Specialist Jones. Our thoughts and prayers are with them during this difficult time." Shelby's death was investigated as a homicide. However, according to CNN, the case was presented to a grand jury on June 11, 2020, but for reasons unknown, the district attorney declined to prosecute. According to the Killeen Police Department, the case has been exceptionally cleared. Apparently, there was not enough evidence to pursue justice. No suspects have ever been publicly named, nor any motive as to why he was shot and killed. Unfortunately, Shelby's murder not only remains unsolved, but it also adds to the growing list of unsolved murders involving soldiers from the base. We actually visited the location where Shelby was found bleeding to death. Take a look. It was in the parking lot of this gas station, just miles from Fort Hood itself, where one of the first unsolved murders in the year 2020 took place. On March 1st, 2020, at approximately 3:15 in the morning, a man named Shelby Tyler Jones was found here in the parking lot of this gas station with a gunshot wound. Now, paramedics arrived on scene quickly. They tried to save Shelby's life, but unfortunately, he would end up dying. Now, interestingly, the authorities to this day claim that that gunshot wound was sustained at a nearby strip club that is off of this same road, Fort Hood Road here in Killeen. And yet, to this day, this homicide remains unsolved. There are no suspects, and nothing ever came of it. It was just another soldier taken by the curse of Fort Hood. Hey everybody, it's Colin here. Thank you for watching today's video. Hello to all the new subscribers and hello to the rest of our beautiful, wonderful, spooky family. As you know, every single week here on the channel, we give away a free gift bag to one lucky viewer of the show. And this week, to enter the contest, all you have to do is like today's video, let's smash that like button, and comment Fort Hood in the comment section below. I'm going to give y'all 10 seconds to do this now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So go comment. You can comment multiple times. It helps the video so much. But anyways, let's get back to today's video. Thank you for listening to my little spiel. I love you guys so much, and stay spooky. Only a few days later, on March 5th, 2020, 29-year-old specialist Christopher Sawyer allegedly self-deleted in the bedroom of his Fort Hood housing. Horrifically, his body was discovered by his 5-year-old daughter, Elsa Ray. Originally from San Francisco, California, Christopher entered the Army in October 2017 as a wheeled vehicle mechanic. In 2018, he was assigned to the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team, 1st Cavalry Division, and had a slew of awards, including the Global War on Terrorism Medal, Army Achievement Medal, and the National Defense Service Medal. Colonel Michael Schoenfeld stated, "We are deeply saddened by the loss of any member of our Iron Horse team, and we will mourn this loss as an organization." According to CID investigators, they stated that Christopher's death was not foul play. However, it wasn't immediately ruled out. As of today, there have been no updates on the case, and Christopher's self-deletion only added to the troubling series of deaths at Fort Hood. According to the USO, self-deletion rates amongst active duty military members have increased at an alarming rate post 9/11. According to a report in 2021, there have been 30,177 reported self-deletions among veterans and active duty military service members since 9/11. The self-deletion rate is 3 times higher than the number of deaths reported due to combat, 7,057. In a paper titled Costs of War, Brown University reported, the report finds that these high self-deletion rates are caused by multiple factors, including risks inherent to fighting in any war, such as high exposure to trauma, stress, military culture and training, continued access to guns, and the difficulty of reintegrating into civilian life. But the study finds that there are factors unique to the post-9/11 era, including a huge increase in exposure to improvised explosive devices, an attendant rise in traumatic brain injuries, and modern medical advances that have allowed service members to survive these and other physical traumas and return to the front lines in multiple deployments. The combination of multiple traumatic exposures, chronic pain, and lasting physical wounds is linked to self-deletion behaviors. The New York Times reported that self-deletion has been more deadly than combat for the military, saying more than 45,000 veterans and active duty service members have in the past 6 years. That's more than 20 deaths a day. In other words, more self-deletions each year than the total American military deaths in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's a staggering number that really should disturb you, whoever's watching this at home. About a week after Christopher's death, on March 14th, 2020, 23-year-old specialist Freddie De La Cruz Jr. was found dead inside the Summerlin apartment complex in Killeen, alongside 2 other victims, Army veteran Shaquan Markel Allred and Asia Klein, who was also pregnant with Freddie's child. All 3 roommates were found shot to death. Originally from Vidalia, Georgia, Freddie had enlisted in the Army in November 2017 as a cavalry scout. Inside the apartment, investigators located 17 spent 9mm shell casings, and 1 had pierced through a water pipe, which had alerted the fire department. A few months later, in August, 21-year-old Army veteran Bernard Linnell Morrow was arrested and charged with capital murder. Apparently, Bernard had been to the apartment before and was a known acquaintance to the victims. Freddie's 4th roommate, who had been at work during the shooting, told investigators that Shaquan mentioned that Bernard was scheduled to come over on the night of the homicide. When investigators located Bernard in Mississippi, they found the murder weapon in his possession. In 2022, he was found guilty of the triple homicide and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The horrific murders only further fueled the idea that Fort Hood had failed to protect its own soldiers. Freddie's mother, Latrice Johnson, stated, "We need some answers. They're supposed to protect and serve, but how can they protect and serve when their own are getting killed and brutally murdered?" The next case was that of Vanessa Guillen. Now, obviously, I'm not going to talk about that one since I did a whole episode with Courtney on Murder in America about it, but it should be noted that her case really put a spotlight on Fort Hood. However, even with that spotlight, death continued to curse the base. 3 days after Vanessa's disappearance, 21-year-old Private Gavin Chambers died at Fort Hood with no cause of death listed. And a few days later, on April 29th, 19-year-old Private Joshua Barnwell died, followed by the self-deletion of 37-year-old Sergeant Brad Reynolds on May 16th. On May 18th, Fort Hood soldier 27-year-old Brandon Rosecrans' burning orange Jeep was discovered inside the Evergreen Estates suburb of Fort Hood. 3 miles away, his body was found with 4 gunshot wounds. Brandon's father, Thomas Berg Sr., said that his son was lonely and looking for friends in the wrong places. Eventually, Brandon befriended 28-year-old Brandon Oliveras and 37-year-old Estrelita Falcon, and they immediately started leeching off of him. Ultimately, Brandon was charged with Rosecrans' murder, and Estrelita was charged with using his Jeep and hindering prosecution. The murder appeared to be robbery related, as all of Rosecrans' possessions he kept inside his Jeep were missing. His iPad, gas mask, 9mm, 40 caliber, 22 mini AK rifle, cell phones, armor, footlockers, and work battery. All of that was missing. Thomas Berg Sr. believed that his son's death could have been prevented if army posts were made more safe. On July 3, 2020, Navajo Nation native 33-year-old Miguel Douglas Yazzie passed away mysteriously at Fort Hood. Miguel had enlisted in the Army in 2016, where he served as an Air Defense Enhanced Early Warning System operator. Before being stationed at Fort Hood, Miguel had spent the majority of his time in South Korea. On July 2nd, Miguel fell ill from complications from ischemic enterocolitis, an infection of the large intestines. According to an article in Vanity Fair, Miguel had repeatedly requested to see a doctor on base regarding his illness, but he kept getting denied. They told him, "You're going to be fine, just wait it out, we'll see you eventually." However, the next day, Miguel suddenly passed away after it was determined he suffered septic shock. As with Carlton Chi, Miguel's family also believed that something sinister may have happened and that Fort Hood has not been forthcoming with information. Navajo Nation speaker Seth Damon stated, "We are deeply disturbed by the string of deaths at Fort Hood, and if there is any malfeasance or negligence involved, the Navajo Nation calls on our national leaders to pursue every available avenue to protect the lives of our Navajo warriors and those serving in the U.S. Armed Forces." As of now, there have been no updates regarding the investigation into the death of Miguel Yazzie. After the murder of Vanessa Guillen, her family tirelessly advocated for other military families who were dealing with the same tragedy. Families who had been silenced, dismissed, and even ignored were finally given a voice to speak publicly about what had happened to their loved one. Shortly after Vanessa's dismembered body was discovered, another family demanded answers for the tragic death of their son, 26-year-old Private Mejor Morta, who was found floating near the base of Stillhouse Hollow Lake Dam in Bell County, Texas on July 17, 2020. Originally from Pensacola, Florida, Mejor had enlisted in the Army in September 2019 and was assigned as a mechanic for Bradley Fighting Vehicles. In May 2020, he joined Fort Hood's 1st Cavalry Division, and according to his sister, Hazel Morta, Mejor was determined, goal-oriented, and genuine. She said he had his goals lined up and strived to reach them. He actually posted his dream house and car on his bedroom wall to motivate himself every day. Mejor had big plans to start his own business before his 30th birthday. However, just after midnight on July 17th, his dead body was discovered floating in the lake by a group of fishermen in a boat. Autopsy results determined that his cause of death was drowning. But for Mejor's family members, they didn't believe that he would have gone swimming or hiking in the area alone, especially not in the middle of the night. Hazel admitted that he had never mentioned the area before, although it was a popular location for outdoor activities. On September 22, 2020, Fort Hood publicly announced that there was no foul play involved in Mejor's death, and the Bell County Sheriff's Department officially closed the case. However, Mejor's family members still question the circumstances surrounding his death. Is it possible that something sinister happened to Mejor Morta and that Fort Hood tried to cover it up? With the base having a documented history of unexplained deaths, self-deletions, and rampant assault and harassment cases, many wonder if the systemic issues at the base could have contributed to Mejor's disturbing and random-seeming drowning. It should be noted that it is a very popular way to get rid of a body or to kill people. To stage something to look like a self-deletion is to throw a body in water because it can wash away any evidence, it can cause bloating and destruction of any evidence that would be found on or around a body. So it's just suspicious to me when anyone drowns. I talked about that extensively with the Austin drownings video and the smiley face theory video that we did. But something even more disturbing was going to happen that year. On August 17th of 2020, 23-year-old Sergeant Elder Fernandez disappeared. Interestingly, a few months prior, Elder had reported unwanted contact to his superior after another staff sergeant groped him in a supply room while on base. Elder was transferred to another unit, but he was bullied and hazed relentlessly for outing the man who had groped his buttocks. A few days before his disappearance, Elder's mother discovered that he had been hospitalized at the Army hospital on base. When she spoke to him, he wouldn't provide details as to what happened, but promised to tell her everything when he got out. According to an article in Stars and Stripes, Elder had been hospitalized for self-deletion ideation and had requested permission to go back home to Brockton, Massachusetts to recover. However, his request was denied. On August 16th, Elder left the Army hospital and went to his friend's house, after which he was never seen again. When Elianda Fernandez didn't hear from her son, she contacted Fort Hood Military Police and they told her that he most likely left on his own accord. They weren't concerned for his safety, and they instructed her to contact the Killeen Police Department if she wanted to pursue an investigation. And once again, just like with all these other soldiers, they immediately classified him as AWOL, which is basically, as you can see here, something that they do which prevents any investigation or search for these soldiers from being performed. And at first, the Killeen Police also pushed back and told Elder's mother that he was an adult, and they believed that he had also left on his own accord. Eventually, an investigation was launched on August 19th, but once again, CID investigators at Fort Hood had allowed the first 48 hours of Elder's disappearance to lapse, making it incredibly hard to find any leads or evidence related to his case. Eliana offered the contents found inside of Elder's car to the police, his iPad, laptop, and external hard drive, but for whatever reason, they refused to take it. The family attorney, Lenny Keston, would later say, "I am astounded nobody is interested. Is it possible Elder was murdered? Is it possible Elder self-deleted? It's possible. Don't they care as to what happened to Elder Fernandez? Don't they want to know why? A few days later, on August 25th, a railroad worker in Temple, Texas saw something strange hanging from a tree across from a burned-out warehouse near the railroad tracks. Upon further inspection, the man realized it was a dead body. Heavily decomposed, it was hard to determine how long the body had been there. Unfortunately, the body belonged to Elder Fernandez, and the Temple Police Department ruled his death quickly a self-deletion. On August 26th, CID determined that Elder's account of assault was unsubstantiated when the staff sergeant was cleared after he passed a polygraph examination. Further, their investigation also discovered that in the months leading up to his death, he had displayed erratic behavior. Stars and Stripes reported his personality shifted around April, then his odd behavior escalated a month later after Fernandez reported being assaulted by a supply sergeant. CID used a polygraph to clear the accused sergeant of wrongdoing. In June, Fernandez became angry at a tire store on base and poured soda on a computer keyboard. Later that month, he encountered the supply sergeant he'd accused of assault at a convenience store on base. Fernandez stood behind his car, blocking him in until police were called. People interviewed by CID described Fernandez during this period as paranoid, believing that he was being followed by the FBI. He thought that people wanted to poison him or put a bomb in his car. He would place baby and dog toys in the doorways of the friend's home where he was staying in Killeen, one of the many reasons the two argued and Fernandez moved out. Fort Hood also stated that they had done a thorough search and investigation regarding Elder Fernandez, including his mental health and interviews with family and friends. But his family members admitted that no one had contacted them. And further, his behavioral health team at the hospital failed to follow up after he was a no-show for a critical therapy appointment. Being listed as high risk meant that clinic personnel must attempt to contact the patient same day. Fort Hood also stated that if the soldier could not be located, then they should contact the unit commander to help arrange contact and create an appropriate follow-up plan. However, none of that happened for Elder Fernandez. Family attorney Lenny Keston admitted that Fort Hood failed Elder when it came to giving him any mental health support, and when they failed to look for him despite knowing that he was high risk for self-deletion, Eliana called and begged investigators to look into the disappearance of her son that something happened. This is just another example of the systemic failures in addressing the well-being and mental health of Fort Hood soldiers.
Look what happens when you report harassment at Fort Hood. You get bullied, you get hazed, you get harassed, you turn up dead.
Attorney Natalie Qualm revealed details into how Sergeant Fernandez was found.
They told us that they found Elder from a tree near a railroad.
She says Fernandez was found with his military ID, cell phone, car keys, a backpack, and $900 on him.
It's very suspicious. Someone's gonna stuff with all that stuff. No, questionable. Let's put it that way, and I don't put anything past anyone anymore.
People are asking, why didn't Vanessa report the harassment? Why didn't she? Fernandez is an example. He's an example that if you speak up, if you report it, look what happens to you.
We were truly hoping for a different result and reuniting Sergeant Fernandez with his family and the teammates that miss him dearly.
In Killeen, Fort Hood officials gathered to address Fernandez.
We're deeply saddened to be here today. I can tell you that Sergeant Fernandez did report that he was assaulted when somebody allegedly grabbed his buttocks, and we found no witnesses that could corroborate for Sergeant Fernandez's allegations.
And I'm sick and tired of this happening over and over again. Just knowing that this happened to Vanessa, I thought this was going to stop. It didn't. More deaths are coming out.
They are very frustrated with the lack of information coming out of the military and coming out of Fort Hood.
He left his own country to come and serve America. Whoever did this will pay for it.
The soldier's family wants answers.
I just hope this will be the last one, because nobody should just go disappear on Earth like in thin air, and all of a sudden you find him hanging somewhere.
His body found near some railroad tracks about 20 miles from base. From Texas, his aunt now tells us his family does not believe it was a...
Because he reported assault and he's a man, so he became the subject of bullying and all kind of harassment.
No, he wouldn't do that to himself. He would never do that to himself.
That base is toxic. Our soldiers are not safe. We need to protect our military. What is going on?
We actually visited the location in the area where Elder's body was discovered. Take a look. So for our final stop on this investigation into the curse of Fort Hood, We've come about 22 or so miles from Killeen to Temple, Texas, where one of the more recent tragedies connected to the fort took place. Now, right behind us is a park. This park is closed right now, so we're gonna be doing this investigation session right here at the border of the park, right where it goes from, public road to private property. But if you look behind there, I don't know if you can see that on camera, there are some train tracks and there's a tree line. Back in 2020, a man named Elder Fernandez went missing. He went missing from the Fort Hood base. People didn't know where he was. He went AWOL. The United States military did not look for Elder. They placed no stock in trying to find him. Well, unfortunately, a short while after he went missing, a train conductor was going down these train tracks just right here, and they noticed the shadowed silhouette of a body from a tree. Unfortunately, that was Elder. Like I said in this video already, I believe, Elder had alleged that he was on the Fort Hood military base. How deep that went, how many people were complicit in it, those are things we still don't know. But the theory is that he came out to this area to unalive himself because he could get no justice. No one was looking and no one was really trying to help him. Or there's also the possibility that he was silenced, since people who report those things oftentimes end up meeting very tragic ends to their lives. But right now we're going to do an Estes method session right here and see if we can connect to anybody. I do want to one more time really stress that we're not trying to speak to individual people. These are very, very heavy and serious and real topics that we're covering here. So we're trying to do this with respect, but we're also trying to get answers and any new information that we can dredge up. We can't technically step foot into the park. I mean, I would, but you can see that the actual gate to the park is closed and padlocked. So even if you hop this little yellow fence, you won't be getting anywhere. Well, let's do this, man. So if you guys have never seen what an Estes method session is, maybe you're watching one of our videos for the first time, Connor is going to be listening to the spirit box, which is what we've been using this whole video to try and communicate with anybody or anything. And he's listening with these headphones, so he's not going to be able to hear my questions. And he's just going to keep his eyes closed. We've been doing this for years. This is just our usual method. But to anybody who might be out here at the Marvin Fenn Park, we are wondering what happened to a young man named Elder Fernandez who came here and whose life was ended right over there by the train tracks. So if you could speak with us and give us any answers as to what happened, we'd be super grateful. My name's Colin.
My name's Connor.
All right, man, let's do this. We're here wondering if...
Not long.
We're not going to be here for a long time, that's correct.
It wasn't natural.
Are you talking about what happened to the man who was found over there by the train tracks?
Cut the slack.
How
convenient.
Well, it was convenient for them, and I'm sure they did have to cut him down. Can I ask who I'm speaking with?
Up in corporate.
Up in corporate? Is that what you worked a corporate job before you passed on?
Is it still coming?
Is what still coming?
3 days.
Something's gonna happen in 3 days?
Tracked us down.
Who tracked you down?
In the showers.
That's disturbing. Obviously Elder alleged that he was...
No consent.
So, I think we all know that the young man who was found here had been victimized.
So many questions.
That's right, we do have a lot of questions.
Things I love.
Have there been other people related to Fort Hood who have been trying to speak out about they suffered and they were killed?
It's all for nothing.
It's definitely not for nothing. We're hoping to reach hundreds of thousands of people with this video to tell them. We want to tell them your truth. What do you know about what was going on at Fort Hood?
Leave Killeen.
Well, we already did. We're in Temple and we're leaving after this. What do you know about Fort Hood?
Lost 2 points. In April.
What can you tell me about the dark things that happen at Fort Hood?
What do you know?
Well, we know about a lot of people who died very mysterious and bizarre deaths
They
connected.
directed you too.
No one's directing me to say or do anything. We're just investigating this. What do you know about what happens there?
No more media. Down.
They shut down the media access? What are the secrets that they're hiding? Can you tell us anything?
It lasts forever.
Well, we're trying to figure out...
It's weird, I feel like someone's actually pulling this camera forward.
Do you not want to talk to us about this?
What a gift. In April. Guns on the house.
So, were you threatened into silence?
Say goodbye.
I know a lot of people have been threatened into silence on the Fort Hood campus. Were you one of them?
Eat the blast.
They threatened you with weapons?
They're outside. On Thursday.
We're just trying to figure out why so many people have died connected to the base. Do you know anything about...
Coming home.
Well, I would love for you to find your way home, but do you know anything?
Things have gone bad.
That's very true. Things have gone very bad with Fort Hood. But why?
The damned in Austin.
This has something to do with someone or some people in Austin?
Hey, ready for a fight? And a woman.
Yeah, there have been men and women that have died in these weird ways. Why do they keep dying? You're saying you were broke before you passed?
Steve had it. Ride the roller coaster.
When it comes to...
He's a new man.
When it comes to the terrible things that were happening at Fort Hood, how widespread is violence?
Created equally.
Is it a big problem there?
The carnies?
I have a feeling a lot of it's covered up. Is that true?
Sounds pretty hard to do.
Definitely not. I mean...
The end.
I think a lot of people have been killed covering things up at Fort Hood. Is it that pattern of violence?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
I jumped off it.
What about secret government programs? Do those happen at Fort Hood?
Bad girl.
Who is a bad girl?
LT. Kids like me.
I don't know an LT. I'll have to look into that, but...
That's what you do.
That is what we do. We're just curious about the things that happen at Fort Hood that they don't want the public to know about. What are some of those things?
I'm in the red.
You owed people money?
Never got nominated.
For an award, maybe? Or a position? Is that what you're talking about?
New boat.
They're working on a new boat there?
I need a drink.
Well, I'd love to get you one, but what would you want?
That's the census.
Are you not able to tell us about what happens there, or are you afraid to tell us?
Joshua.
Joshua who?
I'm tired.
What's happening there that the public doesn't know about?
Still remains. You said it.
I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of soldiers and bodies that have never been found. Is that true in Killeen? Are there more bodies?
Believe it. They're coming.
You've said that a few times.
Austin, Texas.
So there's a connection to Austin here. Is that
Horns?
Horns, like longhorns? So are they working on maybe like a
What a hit.
maybe like a secret technology at Fort Hood, using like software stuff from Austin?
Hold on. Run.
Is that true? It has something to do with Austin, you're saying, right?
You call that a walk?
What does it have to do with Austin?
Bad performance.
If anybody knows what this all means in the comments, please let me know your theories.
Korean pork. $1.
So, can you tell me what happened to this young man that was found here? Was he alone when this happened? Were there other people with him?
She knew.
Someone knew about what was happening to Elder?
They sent an email. You know.
Maybe they claimed, well,
To all the others.
It's really weird because they had an open investigation, I believe, into the... Are you saying that he felt like they acted like they were trying to help him and they weren't helping at all?
Impressive. Is it not?
It's impressive that these people have gotten away with these crimes, but it's horrible. What can we do to help, and what truth should we let people know?
Get me away from Michael.
Well, I don't know how to help with that, but is there something you'd like us to tell people about Fort Hood that they should know?
The recipient. Staff.
Keep talking about awards, staff. Are you saying that there are people who have received awards and are highly respected there that are...
The Don.
The Don. They're like...
3 times.
So these are decorated people that are carrying out crimes and covering them up?
I'm glad you talked about it.
Well, that's what we've been talking about this whole video. Can you provide any detail about the crimes they commit? Any detail? Like, what are these powerful people doing that they're covering up?
Quit crying.
What are these powerful people doing that they're covering up? Just give us a couple clues.
Come on.
Just give us a couple clues before we're done about what these powerful, respected people are doing that they're covering up.
Clean driven.
Clean driven? Give us some clues. I'm just going to let you talk and I'm just going to listen. What are these people doing that they're covering up?
Shh. An orgy thing.
Tell me more, please.
BAD.
They're doing bad things? Tell me more about this orgy thing and what else they might be doing.
3 nights.
3 nights a week or 3 nights a year? Tell me more about what they're doing.
You're gonna be stabbed?
Well, we're about to get out of here, so I really hope not. What else can you tell me about what they're doing there?
It's not funny.
Are you saying you see me getting attacked in the future for talking about these things? There have been people that have been stabbed in these cases.
No.
Is it dangerous to expose this stuff?
Thank you.
Thank you. It's pretty crazy stuff, man. Sounds like they're having orgies and there's highly decorated people at Fort Hood that are participating in things.
That's not good.
Awarded powerful people there. I don't know exactly what they're participating in. Is that lightning behind me?
No, I watched it.
The f*** was that? What the hell was that flash? We fucking got that on camera. It's like not, it hasn't happened again. That's pretty weird. I just saw it up here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a plane or anything. It's a clear night.
No, it was a bright flash too.
Dude, that's pretty weird, right? What the hell? Yeah, more questions than answers. We always say that, but, I mean, genuinely, it's like...
With cases like this is kind of what you're left with.
There are no easy answers.
And there never will be.
But, what I can say, when there's smoke, there's fire. So something is going on at Fort Hood. Otherwise, you wouldn't have bodies piling up all around Killeen and the surrounding towns. You ready to go home, though? These mosquitoes are or whatever's out here are swarming us. Thank you, Elder.
Thank you.
So some really shocking stuff there. I don't know. You can make of all of this, you can make whatever you want out of all of this. We're doing these investigations because we genuinely care. I believe in the paranormal and spirituality and the spiritual world around us. So I'd like to use whatever we can to get any answer that we can. And there were some really, really interesting and concerning responses that we recorded from what I believe was somebody or something out in that area. Just really, really disturbing stuff. And we're not trying to skew these investigations any sort of way. We're just asking questions and seeing what responses we can gather. Obviously, these are all tragedies, and my heart goes out to every single person affected by all of this. Hopefully, by doing an episode like this, we can raise awareness, get people to learn about these things, hopefully raise a ruckus in the Fort Hood, Fort Cavazos area, send the petition, and effect some sort of a change so that all of this isn't done in vain. But really interesting evidence from that little mini investigation and from all the other segments from this video. And it always makes me wonder, with Elder saying he's paranoid, with him reporting that he was on base, who knows how many things happen on bases like that that go unreported? Who knows if there was more that he was going to report? Any suspicious death like this, it always makes me question, was there some reason that this person could have been silenced? You have to ask those questions in cases like this because, as we know, powerful people like to protect their own. And especially in the military, these people are very powerful and they don't want their positions being ruined. They don't want things coming out about them. So who knows how far they're willing to go to stop the truth from going out. That's all, speculation, but those are just my thoughts when it comes to some of these deaths. And just a few days after Elder Fernandez's body was discovered on August 28th, 2020, 25-year-old Private Carlton L. Chi collapsed during a physical training exercise at Fort Hood. Shockingly, Carlton had no pre-existing medical conditions, which made it pretty odd that a healthy young man would just suddenly collapse to the ground and die. According to an article in Vanity Fair, Carlton had just arrived at Fort Hood, but he felt something was off, something that he conveyed in a text message to his own sister. Apparently, Carlton had been having issues with a few other soldiers, and within a few days of his arrival, someone had stolen his clothing. Once again, he texted his sister and told her there were 3 soldiers who did not like him. On the afternoon of August 28th, Carlton had been instructed to do a training run, and at the end of the second mile, he dropped to the ground unconscious. His parents, who were located in Rama, New Mexico, were alerted through the local police department and rushed to Texas to be with their son. When they arrived at the Carl R. Darnell Medical Center ICU, they found Carlton unconscious in the hospital bed with bruises and cuts on his face, chin, and legs. His sister, Karma Johnson, said, "When we went to see him, he had a cut on his eyebrow line and it was sewed. He had a bruise under his chin. He had bumps when you touched his head. He had scrapes on the side of his face, on his chin, on the inside of his knee. He had tapes on his arms, IVs here and there, some plastic thing to keep him warm. There were so many injuries, and he was healthy before." When the Chi family asked Fort Hood officials what had happened, their story started to change. At first, they blamed his death on heat stroke and said that the training run had been 5 miles. However, they soon changed it to 2 miles, less than half of what they had initially stated. As for the amount of people running that afternoon, Fort Hood admitted that it had only been a few people, but later changed it to a group of 11. As for heat stroke, Carlton's family didn't buy it. Carlton had been an avid runner, weightlifter, and native of the Rama Navajo Indian Reservation in the desert of New Mexico. He had grown up working in the extreme heat and had never once collapsed due to heat exhaustion. Carlton had joined the military to provide for his fiancée and 2 young sons, and as a way to get an education once he was out. Unfortunately, though, after 5 long days in the ICU, on September 2nd, 2020, Carlton Chi died. For his family, Fort Hood's account of what happened just didn't add up. They also learned that Carlton had been left unconscious for 2 to 5 minutes before anyone stopped to provide medical attention. And as for an official autopsy, details have never been released to the public. Carlton's family, as well as the Navajo Nation leadership, expressed their concerns regarding the mysterious circumstances surrounding Carlton's untimely death. For them, they believed that someone, perhaps one of the soldiers who didn't like him, may have been responsible and that Fort Hood was covering up the truth. Karma Johnson stated, "We're tired, worn out, we don't know what to think anymore, we've lost, we need to do this, we need to keep moving forward, we need to find out peace and justice." Fort Hood stated that Carlton died during training. However, an official cause of death has never been released. As the years continued, so did the unexplained deaths and self-deletions at Fort Hood. In October 2021, 26-year-old specialist Maxwell Hawken was found dead behind his company barracks. Assigned to the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team, Maxwell had been at the base since July 2017. As of right now, there are no updates on Maxwell's cause of death. However, it is known, because Fort Hood officials were very quick to announce this, that they don't suspect any foul play was involved. This was just another soldier found dead on campus from an unexplained reason. On March 13, 2023, 20-year-old Private Ana Basaldua Ruiz was found dead at Fort Hood. As with Vanessa Guillen, Ana had complained to her close friends and family members that she had been the target of harassment on base by one of her superiors, and that one of her sergeants, whom she had a relationship with, had choked and slapped her during violent. In a diary entry, Ana wrote, "He was choking me and I couldn't move, and he thought that was super fun." The sergeant was questioned and told investigators that both had been done during, but it was in a playful manner, and at no point did Ana let him know that it bothered her. Ultimately, Fort Hood once again ruled that Ana's death was a self-deletion. However, Ana's father, Ruiz Sarco, said, "My daughter did not commit self-deletion. My daughter was self-deleted." As with Ana's harassment complaint, it was discovered that an investigation was launched in June 2022, but of course, investigators associated with Fort Hood had found that no harassment had occurred. Instead, they stated that there had been an inappropriate relationship between Ana and her superior. Fort Hood officials stated that Ana's superior blamed her for the uncomfortable situation at work. Ultimately, Ana was transferred to another unit and her superior was promoted. But things didn't get better for Ana, and she tested positive for THC in January and was arrested in March for shoplifting perfume and lip gloss from a store on base. At 9:30 a.m. on March 13th, Ana searched what happens when you get a dishonorable discharge. 10 minutes later, she sent one last text message to her dad that read, "My whole life is wrong." Shortly after this message, according to investigators, Ana self-deleted. Unfortunately, Ana's death felt like deja vu with the recurring and ignored incidents of sexual harassment at Fort Hood. While Fort Hood investigators held a press conference regarding the self-deletion of Ana Ruiz, they failed to mention another self-deletion that had happened on the same day that Ana died. 29-year-old specialist Katerina Weichel was found dead off post one day after her birthday. Once again, her cause of death was determined to be self-deletion. According to her obituary, Katerina was born in New York and enlisted in the Army in November 2019. She was married and had 3 children. Sean Timmons, a former judge advocate general at Fort Hood, admitted that although 2 self-deletions in one day was concerning, it didn't come as a shock to officials. He stated, "The fact that 2 happened within a close proximity, honestly, probably didn't even raise any eyebrows for them because self-deletion is such a common thing that happens at Fort Hood. It's very, very problematic." Katerina Weichel's cause of death has never been released, but once again, Fort Hood stated that there was no foul play involved. Although the base pledged to increase transparency after the death of Vanessa Guillen, they decided not to share the news of Katerina Weichel's self-deletion because they stated that they were bracing for a firestorm surrounding the circumstances of Basaldua's death. Obviously, throughout the years, Fort Hood has been plagued with high crime rates, self-deletions, mental health crises, neglect, and workplace toxicity. The great place doesn't appear to be so great after all, and has earned the reputation of being one of the most problematic military installations in the United States. As you heard in my interview earlier, even soldiers stationed all across America know Fort Hood. People don't want to go to Fort Hood because they know the reputation, and what's causing that reputation? It's unknown. There is a darkness that surrounds the base. I mean, think of all of these stories that I've told you in this episode. That is not even like a fifth of the stories of Fort Hood. And there are so many that happen. I mean, imagine stretching back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and really analyzing how many people died, so many different bizarre, disturbing deaths with unexplainable circumstances over the years. We'd be here talking for days. I've been talking so much for this that I'm losing my voice. And this is all disturbing because many people believe that a United States Army base would be one of the safest places on Earth. But for the family members, friends, and loved ones who've lost someone at Fort Hood, this is far from the truth. Although there have been some changes since the high-profile case of Specialist Vanessa Guillen, including leadership changes, the process of reporting harassment and assault, more mental health resources, and the implementation of a program called Operation People First, in which the Army hopes to rebuild trust through engaged leadership, mentorship programs, inclusion workshops, and combating assault, harassment, and retaliation, there's still a dark stain over the base from years of systemic failures. Perhaps being in the spotlight, Fort Hood, now Fort Cavazos, will keep pushing for change so that the tragedies of soldiers who have passed are never repeated. As for the deaths that have been ruled self-deletions, Military Justice for All's Jennifer Norris believes that all of them should be investigated further. She said, "Why did they take their lives? Were those deaths properly investigated? Was it really a self-deletion or was it a murder? Everything needs to be questioned. We can't just pretend the last 20 years didn't happen." And it's so true. With so many deaths, there needs to be investigation. Think of all the deaths that I've spelled out to you here that are surrounded by suspicious circumstances, with family members that are begging for these deaths to be properly investigated, not just as a hastily determined self-deletion, but as a possible homicide. I mean, this goes all the way back to the guy, falling to his death and only having an injury to his head, no other injury on his body. There's the guy, Anthony, whose eyeballs were missing from his head and he's found with all these brutal injuries and it's an accident. You have all these different people. And even not only that, all of the murders that we covered on this episode that are unsolved. Think of just the amount of killers that are walking around Killeen or the Fort Hood campus that have never been caught. People that actually took the lives of other people that have never been brought to justice, that are just lurking there in the community. And to this day, the deaths at Fort Hood have not stopped. Even while we were there filming this documentary, just a few days before we were there, a federal contractor was killed at Fort Hood during some sort of an accident. He was at a training range, a firing range, and he was accidentally shot and killed. Now, with my brain, obviously, I mean, at the end of this that there have been a lot of things covered up at Fort Hood. Whether it's superiors being protected that assaulted people, who knows if there are clubs, rings within, a military base like that of people that get off on sick shit like that and they want to protect their own, close the ranks, make sure nobody finds out their dark secrets. With Fort Hood being such a massive military installation too, we know that the military has conducted tons of psyops, psychological operations, psychological warfare. We know that they've worked in tandem with agencies like the CIA to test people, Operation Phoenix in Vietnam, trying to create super soldiers and murder machines. Soldiers have been experimented on by the United States Army, by, agencies like the CIA for decades. So is it really that far-fetched to posit that a secret program could be being carried out at Fort Hood that is causing people to lose their minds, at least in 1, 2, 3 of these cases? Is there some secret thing that some of these soldiers are involved with is so dark that the Army authorities don't want these truths to see the light of day? There were soldiers talking to their family members about problems they were having and things they had seen. And Marcus, who died, I interviewed his cousin for this episode. He was talking about standing up against, some sort of evil. I'm paraphrasing here, but something that was happening at Fort Hood that he had seen and noticed, and then he's found dead in police custody. So, I don't know. These are all just theories. Maybe there's some secret program people are involved with. Maybe it's the culture of toxicity that exists at Fort Hood, the bullying, the harassment, the brutal training, the beating down on new recruits. I don't know what's causing all of this, but something is happening. Thank you guys for watching today. I know this has been a very long and very dark episode, but this was one that I really wanted to do for a long time because it's a topic that I'm passionate about. I have a lot of family members that have served in various branches of the Army, Air Force, Navy, and knowing that and seeing how these men and women are treated in the United States military to the point where they're self-deleting or being murdered and no one's looking for them. They're going missing and no one even bats an eye. They're being harassed and assaulted and nobody's investigating it. These are the people that are putting their lives on the line for me and you, for our country, giving everything and they're being treated like this, like meat that can just be tossed around, left out in the sun to rot, forgotten about, and then brushed under the rug. It's deeply disturbing. So if this video has made you feel any sort of way, for today's video, I'm going to be donating a portion of the proceeds from this video to the Headstrong Project, an organization dedicated to providing non-judgmental, barrier-free, stigma-free mental health resources and solutions and treatment to the United States military community. The Headstrong Project aims to dismantle the stigma around seeking help for mental health problems. They have an insanely good mission, so I'm going to encourage everybody to donate to them as well. I'm going to put the link in the description and in a pinned comment. And please, if this pisses you off and you want to see some sort of a change, please sign the petition that I am linking, and please share the petition around. Send it to your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your kids, whoever, and get them to sign it so that we can send that petition to local authorities in Killeen. We can send it to Fort Hood and demand radical transparency, investigations into some of these deaths that are clearly not self-deletions, and hopefully get on the local news and get people in the community to talk about this so that some of these wrongs can be righted, and so that some of these families who are still begging for answers can finally be given the solutions that they've been looking for years. Anyways, once again, to all of our military members who are out there watching this video, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart and my family's heart for your service. Thank you for everything you've done for me, for everybody here in America, for our country. I cannot thank you all enough. And yeah, thank you to everybody for watching. My name's Colin Brown. I'll see you guys next Monday. And yeah, that's about it.
Hello.